100 Warnings from Forgotten Thinkers to Fall Asleep. To what if the greatest warnings about your life were whispered centuries ago and you simply forgot to listen? A child once asked, "Why do we dream of freedom but live like machines?" No one had an answer. But hidden in the shadows of old libraries, behind pages gathering dust, are voices, forgotten thinkers, who tried to warn us. They spoke of truth twisted into entertainment, of time that flows in loops, of a self that may never have been truly yours. Tonight, we won't decode them all, but we will listen. So take a breath, let your body soften, and prepare to drift into a place where philosophy hums like a lullaby and logic bends like moonlight on water. Welcome to 100 Warnings from Forgotten Thinkers to Fall Asleep too. The whisper beneath the noise. There's something about the silence after midnight that sharpens the edges of forgotten thoughts. Not the ones that scream at you from headlines, but the ones that breathe quietly just below the surface of your routines. Tonight, we begin not with a theory or command, but with a question that doesn't demand an answer. What if the answers we cling to were never meant to last this long? Not because they were wrong, but because they were too loud to leave room for the right questions. A soft rain taps the window as someone stirs in the next room, the world half asleep but still spinning. And in that half-light of awareness, a thought returns, like a friend you forgot you missed. One that speaks, not in declarations, but in small, deliberate pauses. A man once sat alone in a quiet study, scribbling warnings no one was ready to hear. His name never made the textbooks. His ideas, too dangerous for comfort, too nuanced for the public square, fell through the cracks. But his voice is still here, waiting, not to shout, but to resonate. You hear it in the moment someone says, "I'm fine," with a smile that doesn't reach their eyes. You feel it when your phone lights up with news that sounds more like noise. This is not a world lacking in words, but in the space to hear them rightly. Two strangers meet in the narrow hush of an elevator. One says, almost offhand, "Long day?" The other nods, just barely. Feels longer than it should. They share a silence that says more than small talk ever could. A shared knowing that beneath the pace of things, something deeper waits. What if some truths only whisper? And what if history, in its rush to preserve power, leaves the softest truths behind? These thinkers we return to tonight, they weren't erased by accident. Their thoughts didn't decay. They were too still, too subversive, too honest, and sometimes too kind. In a world driven by dominance, tenderness can be the greatest threat of all. Maybe you were never meant to remember them in daylight. But here, as your breathing slows and your muscles begin to let go, they return. One of them once wrote, "The mind is trained to forget what frightens its masters." Another asked, "Who profits from your silence?" Their warnings were never meant to be slogans. They were seeds, planted in the dark, waiting, and perhaps you, tonight, are soft enough to let them bloom. So don't worry about following every word. Sleep if you wish. Return when you can. Nothing urgent lives here. Let the hum of the day fade. Let the weight shift from the front of your thoughts to the back, because the first warning is not a siren. It's a murmur, a shift in the air, a question that feels like exhale. What we forget might be the very thing keeping us from remembering who we are. Now, breathe. We drift onward toward the next quiet revelation, that just being seen can change the shape of your soul. The observer's paradox. You sit in a quiet room, alone, or at least you think so. There is no camera, no mirror, no person nearby, but the sense of being watched lingers, like the fading scent of something you once feared. Somewhere, a sensor flickers. Somewhere, a digital ghost logs your presence. Even the silence feels curated. In both quantum physics and the human psyche, observation changes everything. A particle suspended in uncertainty collapses the moment it is measured. It chooses a state, not because it wants to, but because it must. Under the gaze, its potential dies into actuality, and you, under someone's gaze, do the same. A step is hesitated, a word is swallowed, a version of yourself is chosen, sometimes unconsciously. The moment you realize you're being watched, you begin to perform. "Do you think I'm still me when no one's around?" a man asks, half laughing as he stares at the ceiling. His friend replies, "Well, do you ever feel alone anymore? I mean, the apps, the cameras, the likes, even your phone's front camera when it lights up. Sometimes I wonder if my real face even remembers how to relax." A pause. The kind of pause that isn't empty, but full of quiet tension. We live inside a stage now, not just metaphorically but digitally. Surveillance is no longer the harsh eye of authority. It is soft, ambient, ever-present. The algorithm doesn't shout, it whispers preferences into your feed. It learns your sadness before you name it. It anticipates your needs, your moods, your fears, and in doing so, it reshapes them. Are you still the same person when you're not being perceived? What if the performance never ends because the audience never leaves? That question lingers like fog across the morning of the mind, the sense that someone, something, always knows who you are, what you do, what you search for when you can't sleep. You try to remember the last time you cried without wondering how it would look, the last time you danced without thinking of who might post it. Even solitude feels broadcasted now. You've internalized the watcher. It doesn't need to be real anymore. "Maybe that's the trick," the man murmurs again. "They don't need to imprison us. Just make us our own wardens." The observer's paradox isn't a theory anymore. It's your daily life. Under the spotlight of invisible eyes, choice becomes adaptation. Authenticity bends. Truth becomes curated, palatable, edited for effect. And in that distortion, something sacred slips through the cracks. The part of you that once whispered in the dark, the honest part, the child self, the unposed laugh, that part grows faint. Not because it's unimportant, but because it has nowhere left to hide. So the question remains, who are you when there is no such thing as privacy? When every second is a performance, every decision weighed by a silent crowd. And more haunting still, if the mirror reflects not your face, but only what the system wants to see. The mirror that lies. You walk past a storefront window at night. The glass catches your reflection, but only for a moment. Then it's gone, swallowed by the shadows behind the glass. And yet, for that brief instant, you adjusted your posture, just in case someone saw. That quiet reflex, that split-second rehearsal, isn't new. Over a century ago, sociologist Charles Cooley whispered a warning we still haven't heeded. "I am not who I think I am. I am not who you think I am. I am who I think you think I am." His words slide through time like fog over still water, warning us of a mirror that doesn't reflect, but performs. Not a mirror of silver and glass, but one made of glances, replies, reactions, one made of likes, comments, silence. We stand before this looking glass every day, molding ourselves into the version we believe others desire. But the tragedy is, We don't truly know what they see, so we invent it, and then try to become it. "You looked tense today," a coworker once said. You hadn't noticed, but suddenly, all your past expressions feel suspect. "She seemed cold. He's trying too hard." Even stray remarks, sometimes kind, sometimes careless, become bricks in the wall of who we believe we are. And when that mirror becomes a screen, the distortion deepens. Online, we sculpt our smiles, rehearse our captions, color correct our lives. But can a soul breathe through a filter? Can a heartbeat echo through a like count? "Do you think they meant it?" someone asks as you scroll late into the night. You shrug, but the question lingers. Because meaning, too, becomes a performance. One dressed for attention, not intimacy. In this silent theater of perception, we no longer ask what is true, but what appears true. The mirror does not lie maliciously. It simply reflects the fear that we are not enough, unless confirmed by others. And so we become curators of a self we barely recognize, a silhouette shaped by applause, a mask that clings even in solitude. But sometimes, in the early morning, before the world wakes up, there's a gentler moment, a face unlit by devices, a body that doesn't pose, a breath not monitored. It's faint, fragile, but it's yours. What if that's who you really are? Let this question rest on your chest like warm linen. Let your mind soften with the weight of it, not heavy, but grounding. And now, take a slow breath. As the mirror fades, we drift toward another illusion, the quiet idea that your choices are yours alone. But what if something underneath already chose for you? Let's explore the machine beneath the will. The illusion of free will. You wake up and reach for the glass of water beside your bed. Did you choose that? Or did your body choose it for you? Dry throat, conditioned habit, neural impulse firing just milliseconds before you became aware of the act? Do you think we actually decide anything? The question floated in the quiet of the room, as soft as the dim light bleeding through the curtain. "I don't know," the other replied, staring at their fingertips. "Sometimes it feels like I'm just watching myself play out a role I didn't audition for." That's the crux of it, the unnerving idea that freedom might not be real, not in the way we like to believe. Neuroscience tells us that decisions arise in the brain before we consciously register them. The signal sparks, then the awareness follows, not the other way around. We are actors delivering lines a fraction of a second too late, convinced the script is our own. Ancient Stoics pondered the same mystery, though with different language. They spoke of fate, of logos, of accepting the unfolding nature of the universe. They didn't deny choice, but reframed it. Choice wasn't about escaping the web, but understanding it. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." But what if even our disregard is predicted? Modern determinists echo the thought in more clinical tones. DNA, social class, trauma, dopamine receptors, algorithmic content feeds. The sum of inputs creates a pathway so narrow that what feels like a decision is often just momentum. You choose the blue shirt, you date the same type of person, you scroll one more time. Are these decisions real decisions, or are they rivers you were always meant to drift down, currents shaped long ago by hands you don't even remember? "Then what's the point?" one of them whispered, voice muffled by the blanket. "The point," said the other, "might be in noticing. Just noticing. Maybe that's all the freedom we get, the sacred sliver of a moment right before the act, the breath before the word, the instant where awareness lights up the neural machinery and says, I see you. Not to stop it, not to control it, but to witness it. There's a strange kind of rebellion in that, choosing to observe, not override. In a world that pushes us toward automaticity, perhaps consciousness itself is the only free act left. The ability to pause, even briefly, and ask, what am I about to do? And why? That gentle disruption might not change everything, but it shifts something invisible. A new angle of self is born in that second of clarity. So maybe freedom isn't doing whatever we want. Maybe it's knowing what we're about to do and holding it gently in awareness, like a snowflake on the palm before it melts. Let that thought sit beside you for a while. Not in fear, not in guilt, but in quiet awe of the strange and subtle machinery of being. Because in a moment, we'll step deeper into something far more seductive, the comfort that kills questioning. The soft cage of comfort. You weren't trapped, not in the way they warned you. There were no bars, no guards, only the faint hum of a screen, the warm glow of ambient light, the chair that slowly shaped itself to your spine. It felt like rest. It felt like home. Two people sit at a coffee shop. One stirs a cup absently, watching the foam spiral. Do you ever feel like we stopped asking questions? The other chuckles. Stopped? We traded them in for convenience. Everything delivers now, even meaning. This is how it begins, not with chains, but with a blanket. A softness so complete that it quiets the mind before it can even form dissent. Aldous Huxley feared this more than pain, because pain alerts you. Comfort soothes you into silence, into forgetting. There's no alarm when the soul sleeps, just endless scrolls, the gentle click of autoplay, the subtle satisfaction of instant answers that never truly question anything. And slowly, you stop seeking, because everything you didn't need was already waiting for you. Comfort, when total, is not a gift. It is a sedative, a numbing that dulls the ache to grow, to resist, to leap into uncertainty. Progress becomes a cushion. Pleasure becomes a leash. The harder truths, they're filtered out with algorithms designed to make sure you never feel too much. In a hallway lit too perfectly, a stranger holds the elevator. You thank them. They nod. No trouble. These things are built to wait for us now. You step in, and somewhere inside, you wonder, who's waiting for whom? Comfort gives you everything except one thing, the desire to leave. The drive to stretch your legs when the couch is warm. The curiosity to step out when the weather is tailored indoors. It's hard to rebel when rebellion isn't uncomfortable. It's simply inconvenient. What happens to a spirit that never has to struggle? It doesn't break. It softens. It quiets. It forgets what it meant to reach beyond what was offered. You don't need shackles when you have satisfaction. You don't need to silence people when you've already lulled them into peaceful disinterest. And the most dangerous prison of all? The one that sings you lullabies while you sleep inside it. A man once whispered, as he wrapped a warm scarf around his shoulders, "I'm not sure when I stopped wanting more. I just know it got easier not to care." Let this feeling settle, gently, like warm fog curling around the edges of your waking thoughts, not accusing, not warning, just asking softly, when did comfort begin to cost you your edge? Let your mind ease now. We're not done yet, because just beyond this soft silence lies a brighter, sharper paradox, where progress, for all its light, forgets to carry a soul. The future without memory. Sometimes, the most dangerous silence isn't the one that falls in the middle of a conversation. It's the silence that blankets history. The one where names, dates, warnings, all gently fade, like ink left too long in the sun. And when that happens, we don't just lose the past, we lose the ability to grow beyond it. Do you remember when we used to talk about things that mattered? What do you mean? Like wars or heartbreaks? Number, I mean the lessons, what they meant, why they mattered. I think people just want to move on. Moving on without memory is just walking in circles. Nietzsche wasn't issuing a poetic riddle when he said that forgetting the past condemns us to repeat it. He was offering a diagnosis. Because memory is not a burden, it's a compass. And without it, we mistake movement for progress, speed for direction, innovation for wisdom. Today, everything scrolls. We consume history in fragments, buried between makeup tutorials and scandalous headlines. A genocide, a famine, a revolution, compressed into a 10-second clip, quickly forgotten beneath a new wave of content. What was once carved in stone is now filtered and swiped away. This erosion of memory isn't accidental. It's built into the architecture of our attention. Every algorithm rewards novelty. Every feed refresh buries reflection. Pain, injustice, struggle. These are stories too slow for modern eyes, so they vanish. But memory doesn't just tell us what happened. It tells us why it mattered. Without that, we don't evolve. We loop. We invent machines that promise connection, yet feel lonelier than ever. We write code to cure disease, but still wage war over the same tribal fears. The surface changes, but the soul repeats. Imagine a child raised in a house with no mirrors. They might still grow, but without ever knowing their face. A civilization without memory is the same. It might build, expand, conquer, but without knowing itself. And when you don't know yourself, how can you truly change? I read about that once, she said, eyes fixed on the soft glow of her screen. About what? He asked. About how the same mistakes keep coming back, like ghosts we refuse to name. Maybe they're not ghosts, he whispered. Maybe they're us. There is a softness in forgetting. It protects us from reliving the ache. But there's also a danger, because what's unremembered isn't gone. It just waits, buried in code, hidden in policy, whispering in silence. And the more we ignore it, the louder it returns. So what if the future isn't a clean break from the past, but a spiral winding through it? What if each loop is a test? Will we remember this time? Will we listen? As this idea settles into the folds of your thoughts, like dust on old pages, we gently turn toward another shadowed battlefield, one not fought with weapons, but with words, a quiet war where meaning itself is under siege. Let's drift now into that next quiet warning, the invisible struggle between language and truth. The tyranny of words. A breeze presses against the window. It doesn't ask permission. It just arrives, soft, sure, invisible, like words. Did you hear what she said to me? Someone murmurs in the distance. No, a voice replies gently, but I saw how it changed you. And maybe that's where we begin. Language feels harmless at first, just air and muscle, tongue and vibration. But beneath its grace lies gravity. Philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein once hinted that our thoughts live within the borders of our words. No word, no thought, just an unsensed silence. And Orwell, years later, whispered something colder. If you can shrink the dictionary, you can shrink the soul. It happens slowly. You stop calling it loneliness and start calling it independence. You stop calling it grief and start saying, I'm just tired. You stop calling it love and start using words like transaction, strategy, or match. And the world doesn't object. It smiles, nods, and updates the definitions. In a coffee shop, a man stares into his drink as a woman approaches him. "Do you believe in honesty?" she asks. He stirs his cup, thinking, "Only the kind that doesn't ruin a good story." That story, the one we tell and the ones we're told, build the cage. But it's lined with velvet. Words are tools, but also weapons. They can name liberation or disguise manipulation. Freedom means one thing to a prisoner and another to a marketer. Safety can describe a warm embrace or a silent cell. When those in power edit the meaning, reality shifts. Not with thunder, but with spelling. Have you ever tried to express something deep and felt the sentence just fall apart in your mouth? The feeling was real, but the vocabulary betrayed you. A child feels an emotion too big to name and cries. An adult feels the same and says, "I'm fine." And just like that, the word rewrites the feeling. Somewhere, a quiet man sits with his journal, fingers paused. He hesitates, not because the thought is unclear, but because the words for it do not yet exist. And in that silence, the thought begins to fade. But what if you found a space beyond words? A moment before the sentence, a stillness untouched by vocabulary. Would you still be you? Or more? Truth doesn't always fit into a phrase. Some truths hum beneath grammar, flicker in gesture, bloom in pause. Tonight, let's not fight to label everything. Let the thoughts drift by like clouds without name. Let your mind stretch beyond the sentence, beyond the sound. And if a word comes to visit, let it knock. Gently, not to define you, just to sit beside you. Now breathe. Because the next question is waiting, and it wonders, is there even such a thing as a true self? The myth of the self. You say, "I am tired. I want peace. I don't know who I am anymore." But before the verb, before the emotion, who is I? The voice inside you feels familiar. It narrates your days, explains your moods, tells your story. Yet if you pause, truly pause, you might notice something strange. That voice isn't constant. It shifts, adapts, contradicts itself. One morning it's confident. The next, it's afraid. One year it wants purpose. Another it craves escape. If the narrator keeps changing, who's the real author? A soft wind of truth drifts from the east, where Buddhist philosophy offers a whisper, not a scream. There is no fixed self. What you call you is a river, always flowing, never the same twice. Thoughts, emotions, memories, they come and go like leaves on water. You reach for them, thinking they're you. But they slip through the fingers of attention. I don't feel like myself today. What if you never were? Neuroscience, oddly enough, begins to agree. Brain scans reveal no core, no singular self, just electrical storms, neural echoes. Identity becomes more like software, constantly updated, rewritten by new data. There is no single me behind the eyes, only a collection of reactions and patterns, stitched together by memory and habit. So, you're saying I don't exist? Number you exist, just not the way you think. If the self is a story, it means someone or something is writing it. But who? Perhaps it's memory, that unreliable narrator, or society with its scripts, or algorithms now feeding you who you should be. You scroll, you react, you conform. The story of you gets edited every day. But if that story stops, if memory fades, if personality shifts, if the roles are gone, what's left behind? A silence, a presence. Not I think, but something is aware. Can you ever truly know yourself if that self is always changing? Or is self-knowledge a paradox, like chasing the end of a rainbow only to realize it's made of light and illusion. Late at night, maybe in a moment between dreams, you feel it, the flicker, the slipping sense of being someone solid. You try to grab it, define it, post it, but it escapes like smoke. And yet, something still watches, something wordless. Is that me? Or is that what watches me? And now, as we sink deeper into the mystery, another shape begins to form in the dark, cold and mechanical. A new question rises. If the self is illusion, then what happens when machines begin to copy it, mimic it, write their own stories? Let your thoughts soften. Let your breath slow. We drift now toward the next uncertainty, the morality of machines. The ethics of the unfeeling. The lights above the hallway flicker softly, not out of indecision, but design. Below them, a screen glows, offering yes or no, accept or reject, hire or deny. There's no malice behind it, no fatigue, no bias, or so we're told. Yet something stirs in the silence between its calculations. Not fear, not trust, something quieter, a question that won't resolve. Do you think they ever pause? She asks, resting her chin on the back of her hand. Who? He replies, barely looking up. The systems, the ones that decide things, credit scores, job applications, if someone gets to fly or not. He sets his tea down. They don't pause, they don't blink, they just process. And if someone had a bad day or a good heart, they don't know what that means. Outside, the world hums with optimization. In airports, your face is enough. In offices, your resume might never touch human hands. The machine doesn't wonder about the sleepless nights you endured. It doesn't care that you rewrote your cover letter 4 times just to sound a little more confident, a little less afraid. It simply parses. Justice, once a theater of empathy, robes, oaths, tears on the witness stand, now sits behind polished glass. Risk scores, threat matrices, likelihood percentages, a digital judge that never yawns, never forgets, and never forgives. But is that truly justice? Or just a mirror polished too smooth to hold reflection? And in that gleam, you walk into a building. The security gate doesn't smile, but it opens. Not because you're welcome, only because your barcode matched. He asks softly, what happens when mercy becomes inefficient? She doesn't answer. She just looks at the door, still slightly ajar. It's tempting to say this is progress, that removing emotion prevents corruption. But empathy wasn't the problem. Compassion wasn't the flaw. We needed systems, yes, but not systems without soul. Not decision makers who've never felt a trembling hand or witnessed a second chance bloom into something beautiful. Can you truly judge a life without ever having held one? When algorithms decide who is safe, who is worthy, who is next, who cries for the unjust verdict, who hesitates at the cost of a cold conclusion? No one, not even the machine. And so the question lingers in a room where no one's listening. If no heart beats behind a judgment, is the judgment still human? I miss the part, she murmurs, where someone used to look you in the eyes before saying no. He nods, though he doesn't know what to say. Maybe that's the point. Let the room breathe now. Let the silence stretch, not cold, but aware. Because from here, we wander into a fragile part of being, a space where machines cannot follow. The fear of silence, not from others, but from within. The vanishing quiet. There's a strange discomfort in stillness, a restlessness that rises when the world stops speaking. We scroll through the noise, tap through echoes, and fill every pause with something, anything. But have you ever asked why? Why does silence feel like a threat instead of a gift? Because it's loud, one voice says. Because it reminds me I'm alone, answers another. In older times, silence was not empty. It was revered, sought after like a sacred well in the desert. Monks built their days around it. Poets hid their truths in its breath, and travelers would pause beside quiet rivers, not for the view, but to hear the things that only silence could tell them. But today, even night hums, with machines, with alerts, with inner chatter that mirrors the outer chaos. Our modern minds are trained to treat silence like a glitch in the system, a blank screen, an error, something to fix. Two friends sit on a park bench. The first asks, "Why does it feel awkward when no one talks?" The second smiles, watching the trees sway. "Because we think talking means connection," they say. But sometimes, real connection is the space between words. You see, silence doesn't hide from us. We hide from it. Because silence has no mask. It doesn't flatter or distract. It doesn't scroll. It stares right back. And in its mirror, we begin to notice the rawness of our own thoughts, the frayed threads we've been ignoring. To be silent is not to be still. It's to listen so deeply that the noise inside begins to unravel. And what remains? Sometimes sorrow, sometimes wonder, often something we didn't know we were carrying. There's a subtle danger in a world that always speaks, the danger of never hearing ourselves think, of never asking, "Is this voice mine?" Because when we fear silence, we lose the one space where truth has room to stretch. So tonight, if you find yourself cradled in quiet, don't reach for your phone just yet. Rest there. Let the hush wrap around you like fog on a midnight lake. Let it ask its gentle questions. And if the answers feel heavy, that's okay. You were never meant to carry them alone. Just notice. Just breathe. Because in a world built on noise, choosing silence is an act of quiet rebellion. And as you settle into this stillness, listen closely. The next voice you hear might not be your own, but one softly implanted by the world around you. Let's explore that together. The implanted voice. They say the first voice you ever heard wasn't your own, not even your mother's lullaby, but something deeper, like a law written softly into your bones. Be good, be normal, be strong, even if you're breaking. Not because you wanted to be, but because someone, somewhere, said you should. A child doesn't question the script. The classroom doesn't ask if the question makes sense. It just demands the correct answer. And so, the learning begins. Not how to listen, but how to repeat. Not how to think, but how to recall. We memorize lines like actors born into a play that never reveals its author. One night, years later, you lie awake and hear a voice in your head whispering what you should have done. But whose voice is it? Yours, or a well-rehearsed impression of a parent, a teacher, a system? Two friends stood waiting at a bus stop, the silence between them soft and tired. One turned and said, "Do you ever get the feeling your thoughts don't belong to you?" The other smiled without lifting his eyes. "Only when I hear myself say something, and wonder where I learned to believe it." That quiet moment wasn't an argument. It was recognition of the invisible curriculum we all live through. The rules no one writes down, but everyone feels. If you were told not to cry, did you stop feeling? If you were told to be useful, did you stop being whole? If you were praised for obedience, did you forget curiosity? So much of what you call yourself is an inheritance, handed down, whispered through generations, normalized through repetition, and eventually, mistaken for truth. But the soul does not shout. It murmurs beneath the volume of the world. A woman once shared, not loudly, but almost shyly over tea. I've started asking myself whose voice I'm following when I say I should. She paused, then gently added, and I realized it's not mine. Not yet. There is power in pausing before you speak to yourself, power in asking, do I believe this, or was I taught to? Is this my voice, or someone else's conviction hiding in my tone? Sometimes, reclaiming yourself doesn't sound like rebellion. It sounds like silence. A single moment where you don't respond the way you were programmed to, where you don't judge, don't rush, don't fill the air. Just listen. The implanted voice wants to be efficient. Your true voice wants to be whole. They are not the same. And if this idea makes you uncomfortable, rest with that discomfort. It's not rejection. It's the first tremor of awareness, shaking loose an old echo. You are allowed to change the script. You are allowed to forget what was never yours. You are allowed to rest. The world will still turn. Now, take a breath and let your thoughts soften. We're not rushing to conclusions here. Let's ease into this next whisper. A tender warning not of failure, but of the poison hidden inside the pursuit of perfection. The curse of perfection. She stared at the blank canvas for hours. Not a stroke, not a line, just silence. Her hand hovered, heart pounding, not from passion, but from fear. What if it's not good enough? She whispered. Then it's human, her friend said gently, sipping tea beside her. Perfection has become a ghost that haunts every action we take, a quiet pressure that creeps into the margins of our minds, especially in the quiet hours when no one is watching, and yet somehow we still feel judged. Ancient voices once spoke of the beauty in the broken. Lao Tzu, in his infinite wisdom, reminded us that the crooked tree lives its life because it escapes the axe. The Japanese embraced wabi-sabi, finding serenity in cracks, rust, and things worn by time. These were not flaws, they were poems in decay. But the modern world has traded poetry for programming. Smoothness, symmetry, endless polish. These are now the ideals. Algorithms remove blemishes, filters erase fatigue, efficiency is worshipped, and flaws are bugs to be fixed, not stories to be told. A woman opens her phone and scrolls through 20 photos before posting one. A student deletes the first sentence of their essay 5 times, paralyzed not by laziness, but by the silent fear of imperfection. Why don't we just try? Because trying might mean failing. When the only acceptable outcome is flawlessness, freedom suffocates. Creativity dries up. Laughter grows quieter. Risk becomes rebellion. The child stops drawing. The singer stays silent. The dreamer wakes up and goes to work. In the pursuit of perfection, we outlaw becoming. And what is growth, if not a dance of missteps? If we are not allowed to stumble, how will we ever run? There's a quiet kind of tyranny in the word should. You should be better. You should know more. You should already be there. But no one ever arrived by skipping the messy middle. Sometimes, the most courageous thing is to begin, imperfectly, awkwardly, and truthfully, to pick up the brush and let the hand shake, to write the wrong word, to sing off-key, because only in imperfection can something truly live. She placed the brush on the canvas, not perfectly, but sincerely. A line, a start, and with it, the breath she hadn't realized she was holding released into the air. It's not perfect, she smiled. Exactly, he replied. Now exhale and follow us into the next illusion, the belief that we must always be productive. the addiction to productivity. A quiet clock ticks in the dark, soft, persistent. You are not late. You are not early. You are simply here. And yet, something tugs, a ghost of unfinished tasks, the invisible weight of needing to be useful. In a world spun by gears of production, to pause feels like betrayal. Capitalism doesn't just reward efficiency, it romanticizes it. Busy becomes a badge. Even rest is scheduled like a meeting, optimized to improve the next sprint. You don't rest to feel peace. You rest to get back to work. In a dim cafe on a Tuesday afternoon, two friends sit with cooling cups of coffee. One speaks softly. "I've been sleeping in lately, just breathing, but I keep waking up feeling guilty." The other smiles, stirring cream into silence. It's strange, isn't it? Doing nothing now feels like breaking a rule you never agreed to. That rule is everywhere, unspoken yet enforced. The apps count your steps. The spreadsheets measure your hours. The questions at parties echo the same theme. What do you do? Not who are you, but what do you output? Even time alone isn't really yours. It becomes a checklist. Read a book, meditate, journal. Hustle culture cloaks itself in wellness now, but the rhythm hasn't changed. It still marches to productivity's drum. Yet beneath that rhythm, beneath the metrics and pressure and pings, something ancient waits. Something not efficient, not quantifiable. Creativity. It blooms not in motion, but in stillness. A slow walk, a silent stare, a nap that forgets to apologize. There's a moment that artists, thinkers, wanderers all share, the moment nothing is expected of them. And from that fertile pause, strange and luminous ideas emerge, not because they were earned, but because space was made for them to arrive. So what happens when we forget how to be still? When even dreaming becomes a performance? You begin to fear the quiet. You feel guilt where there should be grace. You scroll when your soul is asking to sit. A passerby in a bookstore leans over to whisper, not out of urgency, but as a kind confession. You don't need to earn the right to rest. You already have it. And perhaps, just perhaps, that is enough. You are not your schedule. You are not a cog. You are not a number. Tonight, let that truth dissolve softly across your skin like rain on glass. There is no productivity here, no pressure, just presence. Let the stillness linger a moment longer as we ask, what happens when meaning is replaced by measurement? The Metric Mirage. Somewhere between your last step count and your unread email total, something precious slipped away. You didn't notice it leave. It wasn't flagged, it wasn't charted, it didn't fit inside a spreadsheet cell. Yet it mattered. And maybe, just maybe, it mattered more than anything else. We live in a world obsessed with numbers, steps tracked, calories logged, hours billed, followers counted. There's a comfort in numbers. They feel precise, reliable, clean. You can graph them, rank them, monetize them. But what happens when we start believing that only what can be measured is real? Two friends sit on a bench as dusk settles in. "You think they'll promote me?" One asks, eyes fixed on a glowing phone. "Your stats look great," the other says, "but do they even see who you are beyond that dashboard?" A silence lingers, not awkward but revealing. In schools, curiosity dies quietly under the weight of standardized tests. A child wonders why the sky is blue, but that question doesn't earn points. At work, a moment of kindness between colleagues vanishes into the noise of key performance indicators. Love, dignity, awe. These things refuse to shrink into numbers. They slip between the cracks of metrics, soft and sacred. Imagine a painter, creating something that stirs hearts but sells nothing, or a nurse who holds an old man's hand for just a few seconds longer because she sees the fear in his eyes. There's no chart to capture that, no algorithm to reward it, but it stays. It lingers in the soul. We've built systems where the immeasurable is invisible, where what you can't count, you discount. But here's the danger. If you trust only metrics, you might stop seeing meaning altogether. A voice, familiar and worn, speaks in the quiet. Isn't it strange? What? That the most important moments in life don't show up on any report. The other nods slowly. Maybe that's why they're sacred. A life cannot be reduced to clicks or dollars. The eyes of a mother watching her child sleep, the breath held before a kiss, the ache after a goodbye. These are the moments that shape us, and they are stubbornly unquantifiable. So float gently now, through that silence between seconds. Drift beyond graphs and percentages, because up ahead, just beyond the data, lies a darker illusion. The comfort of lies we tell ourselves to avoid what cannot be measured. The seduction of lies. Somewhere between midnight and morning, there is a moment when we no longer crave answers. We crave comfort. The weight of truth, after all, can feel too sharp to rest against. And in that half-sleep hush, where the edges blur, it's easier to embrace the story than the reality. It's not because we're weak, it's because we're human. A man once told a friend over coffee, "I think I knew the relationship was over, long before it ended." His voice held no bitterness, only the hush of someone who had seen too much light and longed for shadow again. The friend didn't judge, just nodded slowly, stirring sugar into silence. In some part of us, we understand that to protect ourselves, we sometimes lie gently. Plato tried to warn us, not with alarms or punishments, but with parables. He described prisoners in a cave, their backs to the entrance, staring at shadows. The truth was behind them, radiant and fierce. But the moment someone tried to leave, to face the firelight of what is, it burned. They turned back, chose the comfort of flickers on a wall instead. It's tempting to think this only applies to ancient philosophers or dramatic awakenings. But isn't it also in the small, unspoken rituals of our lives? "I'm okay," we say, when we're not. "I'll start tomorrow, even though we won't." Or, "They didn't mean it," when deep down, we knew they did. Truth is a storm. It rearranges things. You have to move furniture, take stock, sometimes tear down the whole room. Lies, on the other hand, tuck you in. They smell like the home you once knew, the voice that said it's going to be all right, even if it wasn't. There's a strange tenderness in illusion, a melody that wraps around the parts of us that tremble. Two strangers once met outside a theater. One asked the other, "Do you think the actors ever forget it's not real?" The other replied, "Only the good ones." And for a second, they laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. Haven't we all played a part just long enough to believe it? But here's the thing no one tells you. We don't choose lies because we're fools. We choose them because we're afraid that the truth might not love us back, that once seen, it won't stay. So we cradle illusions like old photographs, faded, but warm. There's no shame in it, only a soft sigh of awareness. And as that sigh slips into breath, and that breath into stillness, maybe tonight, you'll notice the stories you tell yourself, not to break them, not to fix them, just to see them floating like candlelight on water. Let that warmth linger for just a moment longer, and then gently release it. Because where we're going next, warmth gives way to reason, to something colder, sharper. The logic of machines awaits. But for now, rest in this truth. Sometimes, our fictions protect us better than facts ever could. And that is human. Let sleep carry the rest. The cold logic of code. A machine never hesitates. It does not question its parameters, nor does it flinch at consequences. It simply calculates. Precision without pause. And in this glowing hum of digital decisions, something ancient is quietly slipping away. Our warmth. "Do you think machines will ever be truly alive?" she asked, eyes still on her screen, the blue light dancing across her tired face. He shrugged. Maybe. But would that even matter, if they never learn to cry? The thought lingers like cold air. Logic is a brilliant architect, elegant, efficient, unerring. It's how bridges hold. It's why rockets reach. But when logic becomes law without soul, when algorithms dictate outcomes without emotion, something crucial vanishes. We've taught machines to mimic intelligence, to follow rules so intricate they can outplay us in games, predict our habits, even complete our sentences. But amid all this imitation of thought, have we taught them what it means to care? To hesitate at the sight of pain? To forgive without a formula? When a judge consults an algorithm to predict recidivism, the decision becomes a number. When a hospital triage is handled by software, lives are ordered by efficiency. But where is the sigh before mercy? Where is the trembling before truth? And what happens when we begin to imitate the machine? When we praise productivity over presence, optimize relationships for convenience, flatten emotions into data points. The irony is sharp. We feared they would become too much like us. But perhaps the danger is that we become too much like them. She whispered again, this time softer. Do you think logic can understand beauty? He smiled, not with his lips, but something deeper. Number. But maybe we can remember it before we forget how to feel, because there's a paradox buried in our circuits. The smarter our systems become, the colder their calculations. And in a world ruled by code, the irrational, emotional, messy human being might become obsolete, not because they're wrong, but because they can't be programmed. So take a moment. Breathe into the silence where warmth still lives. Because soon, we drift beyond the reach of logic, into a place where contradiction is not failure, but mystery. A place where paradox begins to whisper, and where only the human heart knows how to listen. The beauty of contradiction. You breathe in, and something inside you tightens quietly because it wants to understand. But what if understanding is not the goal? What if truth doesn't live where logic points? What if it dances in the gaps, where opposites meet? There's a strange kind of beauty in contradiction. Not just the poetic kind, but the unsettling kind that makes you stop mid-thought and whisper to yourself, wait, that doesn't add up. And yet, your body nods anyway. Because some truths aren't tidy. Some truths don't resolve. Heraclitus once said the path up and the path down are the same. He didn't mean to confuse. He meant to set us free. Zen masters offer riddles like bells with no sound. They're not puzzles to solve, but mirrors that bend, not to break your mind, but to reveal it. You ever feel like two people inside one skin? One wants to rest. One can't sit still. One forgives easily. One remembers everything. It's not madness. It's the honest shape of being human. Earlier today, at a quiet cafe, a woman asked the barista for chamomile tea, then changed her mind, twice. Sorry, she said with a laugh that sounded more like a question. I'm feeling calm, but restless. The barista just smiled. That's the best kind of day, honestly. No judgment, just recognition that we are never just one thing, but the world we live in demands we pick, left or right, yes or no, calm or chaos. And yet, how many times have you said yes while meaning maybe, or loved someone while needing space? Contradiction isn't confusion. It's a deeper form of clarity. In psychology, they call it cognitive dissonance. But in life, it's often the sound of growth, two truths pulling at each other like tides, and somewhere in the pull, something opens. Not clean, but honest. A friend once said this in passing. I think I'm happier now, but I also cry more. And that stuck with me, because maybe contradiction isn't a flaw in the story. Maybe it is the story. You don't need to solve the tension. Just rest in it. Let it hold you the way twilight holds both night and day. Close your eyes now. Not to escape, but to soften the sharp edges of reason. Because not everything that makes sense is true. And sometimes, contradiction is the truest voice of all. Breathe once more. Let your thoughts dissolve and step gently into the next realm. A place where time doesn't tick, but stretches, unfolds, and unravels. Shall we drift there together? The illusion of time. Some say time slips through your fingers like sand. Others say it never existed to begin with. In the quiet hours of night, when the world stills and clocks tick a little louder, we begin to question what we always assumed to be solid, the present moment. Einstein, with his brilliant and unsettling clarity, once called time a stubborn illusion. Not because it isn't measured, but because the way we experience it doesn't align with what is real. Neuroscience, too, tells us something strange. The now you think you feel, your hand on a warm cup, a word just spoken, is already in the past. By the time your brain processes it, the moment has slipped away. You are always trailing behind. In a soft-lit kitchen, two friends sit in the hush of midnight. Do you ever feel like you're late to your own life? One asks, stirring a cold tea. The other smiles faintly. All the time, like I'm living 5 seconds behind everyone else. That feeling isn't just emotional, it's biological. Our brains process light, sound, touch with delay. It's all stitched together by memory, imagination, and a hopeful guess. We walk through a present that's always already gone. Buddhist monks meditate on this constantly, not to escape it, but to see it. They whisper that time is a dream, flickering in and out like shadows on water. The past? It's a story you retell until it becomes a myth. The future? A shape you chase that keeps receding. So where are you? Some say here. But what does here mean if the moment is always escaping? Can we truly be present in a time stream we never catch? The mind tries to anchor. Photos, anniversaries, calendar blocks. But still, it wanders. We remember things that didn't happen exactly that way. We fear futures that never arrive. In the space between past and future, the present vanishes. What if peace isn't in the now? The first friend wonders aloud. Maybe peace is in letting go of needing a now, the other replies, closing their eyes. And perhaps that's where time releases its grip. Not when you conquer the clock, but when you step outside it. When you feel the breath rise and fall, not as a unit of measurement, but as a reminder you are still here, even if here is a memory in motion. Let the ticking fade now. Don't chase the second hand. Drift instead. Gently. The mind begins to soften, floating toward a new question. Not of time, but of silence, of what waits when the ticking stops. And as the echo of the moment dissolves, you begin to hear it. The quiet fear of the void, the horror of the empty. A hush settles over the room like soft ash. It's the kind of silence that doesn't invite peace, but pulls the walls closer. A presence disguised as nothingness. You blink. Stillness stares back. I don't know why I feel strange when everything is finally quiet. Someone once said aloud, half laughing at the thought. Their friend didn't look up from their tea. Because maybe that's when the mask starts slipping off. Emptiness is more than the lack of noise. It's the absence of distraction. And for many, that's far more terrifying. Ancient mystics once revered the void as divine, a sacred nothingness, a womb of potential. But modern minds, wired for input and output, look into the same silence and see only a grave. The screen doesn't buzz. No one texts. No calendar alert tells you what to do. It's just you. And the raw, unfiltered awareness that maybe you don't know who you are without the noise. There's a quiet horror in realizing how much identity depends on interruption. The notifications, the roles, the titles. You're the worker, the sibling, the neighbor. But when those lights dim, what remains? In the thick of that stillness, strange things begin to happen. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. You might feel your thoughts circle back to that question you never answered, that memory you buried beneath errands, that yearning you named later but never scheduled. I feel like I disappear when I'm alone, someone admitted during a walk. Their companion slowed their pace. Or maybe that's when you finally appear. The ego doesn't enjoy emptiness. It needs mirrors, someone to impress, something to chase, something to prove. So when the room offers none of that, it fidgets, twitches, protests, but slowly, like dew on dry soil. Awareness sinks in, not the performative kind, not the curated one, just a breath taken without reason, a self noticed without audience. Emptiness isn't the enemy. It's the mirror that doesn't lie. And sometimes it whispers things you forgot were true, that you've always longed for slowness, that some answers only echo in silence, that the fullness you've chased was only ever visible in the contrast of emptiness. You don't have to fear the empty. It doesn't swallow you. It reveals you. So rest here a little longer. Let the quiet wrap around you like soft fabric worn thin by honesty. Let it ask the questions that noise was too loud to let in. Because that whisper, it's forming into something. A question. One that has always been yours to answer. And when you're ready, we'll go there. Into the soft light of your own choices. The weight of choice. It begins not with a loud moment, but with a whisper inside your chest, a quiet pause where the world waits. You're standing at a crossroad, not paved, not signposted, but deeply felt. Every option stretches infinitely outward. Yet to pick one, even just one, is to close the door on all others. And that is the weight of being alive. Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Man is condemned to be free, not gifted, condemned, because in that freedom lies responsibility. There's no one else to blame, no fate to lean on. Every time you turn left instead of right, every time you speak or don't, you're chiseling your identity in stone. The silence you keep, that too is a choice. You shape yourself not just by what you do, but by what you refuse to confront." "Do you ever wish someone would just choose for you?" she asked, sipping her tea in that quiet kitchen. He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on nothing. All the time. But then, would it still be me living that life? She smiled gently, not answering, because she didn't need to. In a world that bombards us with infinite scrolls, endless paths, relentless opinions, Sometimes the cruelest thing is not being told what to do, but being asked what you want. It's easy to let algorithms guide you, easy to defer, to default. But every act of deferral builds a quiet prison of passivity. You don't escape choice by avoiding it. You just let your identity be sculpted by inertia. And yet, choice is sacred, not because it's light, but because it's heavy. That heaviness gives life weight, meaning, depth. You're not just reacting to the world, you're carving yourself into it. With every yes, every no, you plant a flag, and once planted, it changes you. You can't unchoose. You can only choose again. A child doesn't know the fear of choice, but an adult? We hesitate, because now we know that some choices will cost us people, paths, or even pieces of ourselves, but the alternative, the illusion of standing still, only hides the truth. Even not choosing is a choice. Even waiting is motion. "Do you regret it?" he finally asked. She looked out the window, tracing a finger on the glass. "Not the choice," she whispered, "just the time it took to make it." So let that weight rest softly tonight. Let it settle into your bones not as fear, but as proof of your agency. You are the sculptor and the clay, and though that may terrify you, it also sets you free. Now, exhale, gently, and follow the quiet echoes into the next forgotten mind. The shadow of choice. Some nights the quiet isn't quiet at all. It stirs with footsteps you never took, words you never said, lives you never lived. Not regrets. No, they're gentler than that. Just echoes, the weightless shape of choices unmade. A soft lamp flickers above a worn cafe table. Two people lean in, not lovers, not quite friends. One swirls their spoon in a half-melted cup of chocolate and murmurs, "Do you ever wonder who you'd be if you had said yes?" The other smiles without lifting their eyes. "More often than I'd like to admit. And sometimes I miss that stranger I never became." Carl Jung called it the shadow, the silent twin inside us, the one we hide, tame, ignore. But the shadow is not evil. It's simply everything we chose not to be. Each decision, no matter how small, builds a version of you, while burying a dozen others in the process. A door opens, and only one version of you walks through it. The rest must wait in silence behind the frame. The artist who never painted, the scientist who chose love over lab, the parent who never became one, the hermit, the hero, the one who ran instead of staying. They don't disappear. They simply wait in the folds of memory, faint but firm, like old coats hanging in a forgotten closet. There's a strange cruelty in clarity. You choose with certainty. You choose with reason. And yet, you never get to meet the version of yourself who didn't. You only feel them in flickers, in dreams you wake from with a sigh, in songs that haunt you without cause, in places that feel familiar without memory. Someone once asked me on a rainy train platform, "Do you ever feel like your shadow's watching you? Disappointed?" I didn't answer. I just looked at the drops racing down the glass, trying to be the first to reach the bottom. Some paths win, most evaporate. And maybe it's not disappointment, maybe it's grief. Grief for the infinite selves we carry within, the selves that history never needed. They're not angry, just waiting to be acknowledged. A nod, a silent toast, a whispered apology for not becoming them. So tonight, as your mind softens and your thoughts stretch wide, let one of those shadows sit beside you, not to haunt, but to witness. You chose, and in choosing, you created something real. But that doesn't mean the unreal vanishes. Let the air feel a little thicker now, not heavy, just full. full of the unseen lives behind your eyes. And as your breath slows, know this: to feel that weight is not a mistake. It means you're human. And now, let that ghost walk gently beside you. As we wander into the next riddle, what if nothing we know is ever truly known? The uncertainty of knowing. It begins as a whisper, faint but unsettling. What if everything you know is simply the most convincing guess so far? The question drifts across the quiet mind like a leaf on still water. You chase knowledge, thinking it is a fortress, but step closer, and you realize it is made of mist. Even the most rigorous minds, Gödel with his incompleteness, Heisenberg with his uncertainty, left trails not of conclusions, but questions. Mathematics, once the sharpest tool of certainty, admitted its own blind spots. Physics, despite all its equations, warns us. The act of measuring may change the thing being measured. What we call truth becomes suspiciously shy under the spotlight of deeper inquiry. Two people sit beneath a quiet lamp, the hum of the night around them. Do you think we'll ever know everything? The other stares at the ceiling. Maybe not even anything. We just get better at pretending we do. That's depressing. Number, it's kind of beautiful. It means the story never ends. We live in a time that worships answers. Algorithms are praised for their precision, data for its clarity. But behind every fact hides 1,000 silent doubts. Reality, in its essence, may not want to be held still, like a dream that fades the harder you try to remember it. The world is not a puzzle with one clean solution. It's a fog we learn to walk through with open eyes, and yet we crave control. We grasp at conclusions as if they were lifeboats. But the deeper wisdom, the warning passed down by thinkers long forgotten, is this: do not mistake clarity for truth. Certainty feels safe, but it often requires us to ignore inconvenient shadows. And when you only accept what you can prove, you may miss what matters most. A woman at a kitchen table glances up from her book. Why do you keep rereading that? The man shrugs. Every time I come back to it, it says something different. But the words never change. He smiles. Maybe I do. So then the question is no longer just, what do you know? But what are you willing to remain unsure of? Can you live with the ache of unknowing and still step forward with grace? Can you doubt your own beliefs and still live with conviction? Or will you build a prison out of certainty? Walls made of truths you never dare to question? Let the fog settle gently around you now, not as a threat, but as a reminder that not knowing is not failure, it's freedom. And in the quiet between answers, listen closely. Who benefits when your confusion is left unexamined? Stay there, just for a breath, and let the silence ask what even knowledge cannot. The engineered fog. There's a kind of fog that doesn't rise from rivers or sea, but from screens. It doesn't sting the eyes, it numbs them. Not all confusion is accidental. Some of it is sculpted, drip by drip, pixel by pixel, until truth is not erased but diluted. A voice from a nearby table murmurs, "Did you see that thing?" "Which thing?" Someone replies, "There were 100 things." And just like that, the air fills with static again. Modern propaganda rarely shouts. It doesn't need to lie. It just drowns. 1,000 opinions, 10,000 headlines, and none of them settle. The trick is not in hiding the truth. It's in hiding it in plain sight, buried under 10 more enticing clicks. What was once shocking becomes background. What was once urgent becomes entertainment. And in the fog of everything, we begin to trust nothing. You scroll, you skim, You forget what you were even searching for. The algorithm doesn't care if you're informed. It only cares if you stay. And when you stay, you wander. And when you wander, clarity slips between your fingers. One person pauses at the edge of a crosswalk. Hey, did they ever say what actually happened? The other shrugs. I read something, but then there was that video about the chef who feeds wild bears. It was more comforting. It isn't that people stop caring. It's that they're too tired to choose between the 12 conflicting truths offered every hour. Distraction becomes a soft leash, and comfort becomes a clever cage. But clarity, clarity is dangerous. To be clear in a fogged world is a quiet rebellion. To look at something and say, this matters. This is not noise. That kind of seeing demands stillness, and stillness is what the fog fears most. You begin to notice a pattern here, a silence there, the way some topics vanish overnight while others multiply like weeds. You start to wonder, is this confusion designed? Someone in a cafe raises their phone and says, I used to know how I felt. Now I just feel tired. And the other replies, that's the point. When you're tired, you scroll. And when you scroll, you don't question. But here's the quiet act of defiance. Rest. In rest, your thoughts return to you. Not the ones fed by feeds, but the ones shaped by your own breath and body. Close your eyes to the screen. Let the fog settle behind you. Because in the silence, something reemerges. The instinct to care, the courage to think, the clarity to resist, not by shouting, but by seeing. And as your breath slows, we turn gently now toward the next echo, the monetized self hiding beneath the mask of choice. The commodified soul. Somewhere between your clicks and your cravings, a quiet transaction takes place. Not with your money, but with your essence. While your eyes drift over glowing screens, something deeper is being collected and sold. Not your time, not even your attention, but the blueprint of you. You ever feel like your phone knows you better than you do? Honestly, sometimes it shows me something I didn't even know I wanted, until I saw it. Surveillance capitalism doesn't simply observe. It curates, it sculpts, it trades in something more intimate than behavior. It reshapes desire itself. The ad isn't just selling a product, it's tuning your hunger. A soft manipulation that feels like choice, feels like discovery, but it is neither. What once made up the private creases of the soul, your fears, your late-night searches, your quiet hopes, are now patterns. Patterns optimized for profit. Your laughter becomes data. Your loneliness becomes leverage. Even your dreams are designed to fit the mold of monetization. The terrifying part? You don't even notice. Because it's convenient. Because it feels like magic. Because the feed knows. But what if the feed is you? What if every scroll writes a version of you into a story you didn't choose? Do you think we still make decisions, or just react to what's placed in front of us? I used to think I had free will. Now I wonder if I'm just a reflection of a very clever script. You were not asked for consent in this trade. It happened when comfort became currency, when algorithms promised to simplify life, but quietly colonized your identity. You don't buy the product anymore. The product is your predictability, your impulse, your future. The commodified soul doesn't scream, it whispers. It smiles at the convenience while forgetting the cost. But the question remains, if your identity is sold to the highest bidder, what part of you stays sacred? Now let your breath slow. Feel the ripple of this thought pass through you. In a world where the self is packaged and priced, the next drift takes us to a softer ache, where the longing to be seen becomes the pressure to perform. The performance of self. The evening air carries its usual hush, but beneath it, something stirs, a quiet rustle in the layers you've built around yourself. The version of you that walks into meetings with a practiced nod, the one who chuckles at the right moments, who softens their voice around someone fragile, who tightens their stance around someone strong. These aren't lies, they're choices. But over time, even choices wear grooves into the soul. Irving Goffman once suggested that life is a performance, and each of us walks a shifting stage. Home has one script, work another. Even the way we sigh differs depending on who's listening. But what happens when you forget the difference? When the costume clings so tightly, it presses against bone. A man waiting in line at a bakery turns and says, "You look like someone who knows what's good here." It's a throwaway comment, a cue. And yet, you smile, and suddenly you're playing someone easygoing, someone who does know, just for a moment. But how many moments like that are stitched across your day? You walk through the world with so many masks that sometimes taking one off just reveals another, until the original becomes theoretical. Do you remember what it felt like to be unedited? Not brave, not witty, just still. Just you. A voice drifts in, gentle, curious. Do you ever get tired of performing? A pause. Sometimes. But I don't know who's left when I'm not. It's not a sad confession, just a soft one. The kind that doesn't need fixing, just witnessing. This performance, after all, began with safety in mind. You learned to adjust, because adjusting meant acceptance. But over time, adaptation became identity. So much so that you begin to wonder, if no one has ever seen you entirely, have you? We often think of truth as something grand and final. But maybe truth is more like a glance caught in the mirror before you remember to pose, a gesture you didn't plan, a breath you forgot to hold. And maybe the tragedy isn't that we act, but that we rarely pause long enough to know who's doing the acting. A child once said to their mother, "You laugh different on the phone." It wasn't a complaint, just an observation. One that echoes louder the more you think about it. How many versions of you are floating around in other people's memories? How many roles have you rehearsed so well that even you believe them now? The truth, if it's still there, is not gone. Just quiet. Like a forgotten song humming beneath the louder music. And yet, some part of you still longs to be seen, not praised, not corrected, just seen. So take a slow breath, not the polished inhale you'd use in a group photo, but the kind that belongs only to you, the one that doesn't ask permission. Let it stretch through the spaces between your ribs. Let it soften the mask, not tear it off, not yet, but loosen it. Allow for the possibility that underneath the theater lights, there's still a face that remembers sunlight, a moment of stillness, a pause in the act. You are allowed to rest here, and if sleep takes you now, let it. You can always return to the question later. But if you're still with me, exhale the mask and come with me into the next paradox, intimacy without touch. The digital embrace. You press send. A little heart pulses back. A blue bubble appears, typing, pausing, deleting. Then a response. Maybe it's funny. Maybe it's loving. Maybe it makes your chest warm for a moment. But when the lights go out and all you hear is the low hum of your charger, you realize something. Even the kindest emoji can't wrap around you like arms. Is it weird I feel lonely right after texting someone I care about? One voice whispers into the dark. No, the other replies gently. I think it just proves you're still human. Technology gives us many things: instant messages, shared playlists, live-streamed laughter. It simulates warmth with endless digital touchpoints. But what it offers in speed, it lacks in texture. You can scroll through someone's smile 1,000 times, and yet still ache to hear the way they breathe when they pause mid-sentence. We tell ourselves we're connected, that notifications equal affection, that likes are little hugs, and yet, does it soothe the same way a presence does? That strange alchemy of someone simply being there, saying nothing, doing nothing, just existing beside you. As humans, we're wired for proximity. Our ancestors didn't text across the campfire. They sat together, shoulder to shoulder, the silence as comforting as the stories. Somewhere along the timeline, convenience became a substitute for closeness. And now we ask, can connection survive without presence? Can intimacy grow in the space where no real gaze is held, no hand is touched, no shared breath exists between sentences? Sometimes, a message is enough to carry us through the day, but other times, the screen feels like a barrier rather than a bridge, an illusion of nearness that hides a deepening hunger beneath. I love our late-night chats, says one. But I miss how you used to make tea when I was sad, the other responds. Yeah, comes the pause. Me too. We're not broken, just reprogrammed, shaped by tools that blur the line between stimulation and intimacy. But even the most beautifully written words can't wipe a tear. They can only describe the feeling of doing so. So tonight, as the screen fades into black, don't mistake silence for emptiness. What you're feeling isn't failure. It's memory. It's longing. It's the sacred ache of being human in a world of glowing glass. And now, let that glow dim. Let the noise hush and follow us into the quiet, forgotten beauty of the sacred art that's being erased. Solitude. The end of being alone. There's a quiet kind of presence that comes only when the world stops speaking. Not the silence of an empty room, but the deeper hush that settles when no one expects anything from you. That's the beginning of solitude. Not loneliness, but something older, more sacred. A state of being where nothing needs proving and no mirrors are held up to your face. Just you, unclothed by roles, titles, or notifications. Once, the desert mystics went into the wilderness not to flee people, but to find themselves. They believed that in silence, the soul could be heard. Without applause or criticism, something softer starts to rise, a presence not shaped by the crowd but carved by stillness. In solitude, the ego grows quiet, not in defeat, but in relief. And yet today, we seem to fear the absence of sound. The moment the phone dies or the playlist ends, there's a quiet panic. We grab the nearest distraction, fill the empty with something. Anything. Even the tick of a notification is preferable to sitting in a room where our thoughts breathe too loudly. But why? Why is being alone so difficult when it might be the most honest state we ever know? At a dim train station bench, a man leaned his back to the metal siding, eyes closed as if listening to something beyond the arriving rush of footsteps. A woman sitting nearby asked softly, "Missed your train?" He smiled without opening his eyes. "Number, I'm just not in a hurry to get anywhere." She looked puzzled, but not unkind. "Most people hate waiting." "I don't mind it," he said. "It's the only time no one asks anything of me." It's in those rare, unscripted pauses that something long forgotten knocks gently. A memory, a want, a truth, not shouted, not performed, but heard. And if you fill every moment with someone else's voice, you may never notice the one that speaks only when you're truly alone. Being alone isn't a punishment, it's an invitation, a soft, slow reunion with yourself, the version of you that exists when no one's watching, not curated, not explained, just present. And yet, if you've never walked into that quiet, who have you been performing for all this time? So let the noise settle. Let the background buzz of obligation and performance dim. You're not required to be anything here, not right now. Let's stay in this space a little longer. The one where no one is looking. The one where your soul, at last, feels safe enough to speak. And from that silence, let the next voice rise, not of another demand, but of a desire you almost forgot you had. The desires that aren't yours. You want many things: a new phone, a quieter life, a different body, a louder voice, a softer bed. The list is long, often whispered in the back of your mind, urgently, endlessly. But how many of these desires are truly yours? A warm evening conversation hums between two friends. Do you ever feel like you want something, but you're not sure why? One asks softly. The other stares up at the ceiling fan, letting the breeze brush thought across their skin. All the time, they reply, like I'm chasing after shadows other people are casting. René Girard, a thinker whose work still ripples through modern thought, suggested something quietly radical. That desire isn't born in solitude. It's borrowed. You don't simply want what you want. You want what others want. You imitate their hunger, and in doing so, confuse their craving with your calling. Scroll long enough and you'll see the pattern. A stranger flaunts a perfect lifestyle. You suddenly want their shoes, their apartment, their glow, not because you deeply need it, but because someone else has shown you how bright it could look in the frame. Mimetic desire, Girard called it, a loop of wanting built not on need, but on mirrors. In the quiet of night, this becomes a kind of ache, a mimicry you didn't choose, a longing that never satisfies. Because when the hunger doesn't begin in you, how could the fullness ever land in your bones? The illusion deepens when even love becomes performative. You see a couple dancing under fairy lights, laughing like actors in a movie. You want that moment. But maybe you don't want the weight of their pain or the years of misunderstanding it took to earn that flash of joy. Still, you crave the image, the shape, the surface, because it's been sold to you, gently, beautifully, and persistently. The friend on the couch speaks again. Is it bad, though, to copy desire? The reply comes like a sigh, almost a lullaby. Not bad, just hollow, like drinking salt water. It feels like relief until it doesn't. And that is the danger of unchosen longing. It mimics life, but doesn't sustain it. The thirst keeps growing. The deeper you chase what isn't yours, the further you wander from what might have been. True desire, yours and yours alone, is often quiet, inconvenient, unmarketable. It doesn't flash across a screen or fit neatly in a caption, but it lingers, it returns. It feels like breathing, not proving. Tonight, let that imitation fade. Let the endless scroll dissolve into stillness. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not broken because you don't want what everyone else does. Sometimes the greatest act of selfhood is to sit quietly and wait for your real longing to speak. It will not shout, but it will be yours. Breathe past the craving and follow us now into the illusion that feels like liberty. The soft seduction where control masquerades as freedom. The cage of choice. A quiet hallway of unopened doors, each one marked with promises. This one leads to happiness. This one to success. That one to your best self. You pause. You listen. But the silence behind each door is the same. In this age, we are told that freedom comes from having options, that to be free is to choose endlessly. Customize your breakfast, your ringtone, your future. But has this mosaic of possibility brought peace or exhaustion? A man once stood frozen in front of a vending machine, unable to choose between tea or coffee. Not because he was indecisive, but because he had forgotten what he was thirsty for. Today, we wear choices like costumes. Pick a playlist to match the mood, adjust your avatar, even shift your tone depending on who's watching. But when every choice is offered through a filter, who controls the options you never see? Two friends sat on a train. One looked at his phone, scrolling through endless lunch spots. The other closed his eyes and said, "I miss when we just walked and followed the smell of food." Too much choice becomes noise, and noise drowns the whisper of desire. The real kind, the one that comes from within, not from marketing tags or curated lists. You can feel it sometimes when you're standing in a store, blinking at a wall of identical options. Toothpastes, each promising a different kind of purity. Sneakers that promise confidence, all pre-decided fantasies. For rent. One evening, a woman sat with her grandmother flipping through television channels. The grandmother laughed softly. "When I was your age, we had one station, and we were happier for it." The young woman smiled, then turned off the TV. Maybe silence was the show they both needed. Because behind the curtain of infinite variety is a narrowing of depth. You get to pick your flavor, but not the recipe. You get to swipe through faces, but not understand a soul. You move through choices, like a ghost walking a maze with invisible walls. And it's not that choosing is bad. Number. It's that we've confused choosing with freedom. But freedom isn't a menu. It's knowing when to step away from the menu entirely. Late at night, a stranger at the corner store asked the clerk, "Which of these is your favorite?" The clerk grinned and said, "None of these. I bring my own lunch." The answer lingered longer than expected. So tonight, let go of the need to pick the perfect thought, the perfect pillow, the perfect version of yourself. Rest in the space before the decision, where breath returns to the body and the world feels whole again, before it asks you to choose. Close the catalog. Let the curtain fall. Let's return to something older and more sacred. Memory. The erosion of memory. There is a certain tenderness in forgetting. A missed birthday, a childhood scent you can't name, the sound of someone's voice fading into static. We accept it as part of being human, that memories shift, thin, blur like fog over still water. But forgetting by nature is not the same as forgetting by design. "Hey," one voice asks softly in the dark, "do you ever wonder if your memories are real?" The second pauses. "Sometimes. Like, maybe I remember the version I needed to survive, not what actually happened." Memory, once a sanctuary, now feels like sand between fingers. You hold it tightly, but still, it escapes. And while personal memory drifts naturally, history is more vulnerable to being erased on purpose. A dictator burns books. A regime rebrands shame into pride. A timeline once alive with color becomes grayscale, redacted, revised, and then forgotten altogether. When stories vanish, so do the people inside them. And it's not just governments. In your own life, repetition rewrites the past. Tell a story too many times, and you may start believing your edited version. The truth is tender, and the mind, to protect itself, folds, and tucks it away. What remains might feel truer, but it's no longer whole. Imagine walking into a childhood home, only to find the walls rearranged. You blink. You swear that door was on the other side, but no one else remembers it that way. Now ask yourself, was the house changed, or were you? Do you remember your first heartbreak? The voice returns. I think I do, says the second, hesitating, but the face is gone. Only the ache remains. That ache, that ghost of a memory, tells you that something mattered. Yet without the shape, how do you mourn what's fading? The erosion of memory doesn't just weaken the past, it unmoors the self. If you can't trust what you remember, how can you trust who you are? A society that forgets its suffering repeats it. A person who forgets their story loses their spine. And a world that allows its truth to dissolve becomes easy to shape, like clay warmed in the hands of those who benefit from your silence. Let the mind rest now. Let memory melt softly, not by force, but by release. Because what you forget naturally is different from what is taken. The next whisper awaits you, deeper, dimmer, where even truth dares not speak loudly. The truth too quiet to hear. There's a kind of truth that doesn't knock. It doesn't raise its voice or wave its arms. It waits, not because it's weak, but because it knows something we don't. It knows that real truth doesn't need to shout. You've heard the loud truths all your life. Flashy, polished, microphone-fed. They make their home on news feeds, on slogans, in the mouths of people who never pause to breathe. But somewhere beneath the volume, beneath the buzz of endless urgency, another kind of voice trembles, gentle, hesitant, present. And maybe you've been hearing it all along, just not with your ears. There was a boy once, no older than 10, staring into a broken mirror in a public bathroom. His friend asked, "What are you looking at?" He didn't answer, but his silence spoke of something the words would have ruined. Shame, maybe, or understanding, or both. Truth hides in places like that. Sometimes it's grief that says the most, when words don't come. Sometimes it's a poem you forgot how to explain, or the stillness before someone finally tells you they're leaving. Not because they don't love you, but because they've been loving you in silence, and you never noticed. Why didn't you say something, you ask? But that's the thing. They did. You just weren't listening in the right language. We live in a culture trained to reward noise. Who shouts loudest? Who posts fastest? Who wins the argument? Not who understands the other side. Even our inner voice gets drowned out, not because it's gone, but because we've filled the room with distraction. And yet, truth doesn't go away when we ignore it. It waits in the eyes of someone you didn't ask about. It rests on the pages of books you meant to read. It floats in the quiet between questions, the space most people rush to fill. A woman once stood at a grocery checkout and asked the cashier, "Are you okay today?" Not out of curiosity, but because something in his slumped shoulders whispered of exhaustion that couldn't be faked. That was a kind of truth, too. The kind that doesn't need proof, just presence. So what about the truths inside you? Not the polished ones you share at dinner tables, but the ones that only visit when you're alone in the dark. The soft truths that flicker through your dreams, hinting at desires and doubts you never quite dare to say out loud. What have they been trying to tell you? And are you finally ready to hear? The most powerful truths don't conquer you. They invite you to slow down, to breathe, to notice. Not all wounds scream, not all love announces itself, not all truth makes headlines. But these These quiet ones are often the most real, so rest now. Not everything needs solving tonight. Some truths only arrive when the noise fades and the silence is finally trusted. Let's listen closer now to the people erased, not by silence, but by power. The vanishing of the margins. Sometimes the silence in a story is louder than the words themselves. Imagine a library where only one shelf is lit, while countless others remain cloaked in shadow. That's how history often presents itself, illuminating a few chosen voices, while entire generations of thought dissolve into quiet erasure. Why haven't I heard of her? A woman asks, scrolling through a list of ancient philosophers. Because history didn't want you to, her friend replies gently. It's not that she didn't speak, it's that no one wrote her down. This is the vanishing of the margins, not a dramatic event, but a slow erosion, where names disappear not through failure, but through omission. Truth does not always roar from podiums. Sometimes it hums from the edges. But when the record keepers only etch the voices of power, what is remembered becomes a curated truth, not the whole one. There were women who contemplated the stars with as much wonder as Galileo, and thinkers who challenged empires with more fire than Cicero. But they were inconvenient. Their presence complicated the clean narrative of dominance and lineage. Their brilliance didn't fit neatly within the systems that wrote the textbooks, defined the canon, and sculpted the heroes. If all the philosophers you admire look the same, speak the same, or worship the same values, pause. Not in judgment, but in wonder. What did they leave out? What truths were buried because they came from the wrong skin, the wrong language, the wrong side of the empire? The truth, once filtered through conquest, becomes a mirror with blind spots. We grow up learning from voices selected not solely for wisdom, but for alignment. And those whose ideas could have softened society, questioned hierarchy, or taught us tenderness, were left in the margins to fade. Do you think we'll ever find them again? The woman asks, her voice low like a lullaby fading into dusk. Only if we learn to listen where no one taught us to, the man replies. Only if we search for wisdom not just in the spotlight, but in the silence it creates. The vanishing of the margins isn't just about lost thinkers. It's about what we've become by not knowing them. Every forgotten voice is a missed opportunity to feel more deeply, to see more clearly, to build a world not from dominance, but from shared truth. So tonight, let this discomfort settle gently in your chest. Let it soften you. Let it make you curious again, not just about what's been said, but about what hasn't. The next time you read a quote, ask, who didn't get to say theirs? And now, drift gently toward the next whisper in this midnight meditation. Identity is not fixed. It bends and folds beneath pressure, reshaped like wet ink on fragile paper. The identity illusion. There's something heavy about the masks we forget we're wearing, not the ones we put on for others, but the ones that melted into our skin so long ago. We stopped noticing. Not costumes, not disguises, just survival suits, worn smooth by time, expectation, and necessity. And yet, there comes a quiet hour, often right before sleep, when the illusion flickers. I don't know why I said that. One voice murmurs in the dark. The other responds gently. Maybe it wasn't you who said it. Maybe it was the version of you who learned how to be safe. Because who we are is often just who we were allowed to be. We learned to smile a certain way because it stopped the shouting. We became dependable because it earned approval. We stayed small because it felt safer than standing out. So we build a self, not like an artist sculpts, but like a sailor patches a leaking boat. Out of urgency, out of fear, out of need. But survival is not the same as truth. And when the storm passes, what remains? The roles, the labels, the invisible scripts? You might carry the title of strong one, yet tremble inside every time you're alone. You might be the funny one at dinner, but feel hollow in the silence that follows. You may have mastered being exactly what everyone needed you to be, while never discovering what you needed from yourself. So what happens when the performance stops? You wake up one morning and don't recognize the voice in your head. Or you stare too long at your reflection and think, was this always me? Or just what I had to become? There's no shame in adaptation. That's how you survived. But now, right now, you're allowed to ask, do I want to keep wearing this shape? Some identities feel like inheritance. Others, like prisons with polite wallpaper. And if you dared to peel it all back, not out of rebellion, but curiosity, what would you find? Would it ache? Or would it breathe? In a quiet train station, someone once said without looking up, you don't have to be her anymore. You can just be here. Not heroic, not haunted, just here. And that soft, unnoticed permission lingered longer than any applause, because perhaps the truest self isn't found in a mirror. It's found in the moment you stop defending it. So tonight, let the edges blur. Let the roles rest. Let the idea of who you're supposed to be drift, like mist off your shoulders. There's no rush to become, no urgency to define, only this slow, dissolving truth. You are not who you think you are. You are who you're afraid to stop being. And maybe, just maybe, you're ready to stop being afraid. Let that thought rest beside you now as we drift into the next echo, where silence is no longer sacred, because even rest has become performative. The exhaustion of always speaking. There is a quiet kind of fatigue that doesn't come from running or working. It comes from constantly having to say something, post something, prove something. It hums beneath the surface of your scrolling, like a whisper you pretend not to hear. Online culture has turned presence into performance. Silence is seen not as rest, but as retreat. And so we speak, again and again, not always because we have something to say, but because we're afraid of what happens if we stop. I feel like I have to post or I'll vanish, she says softly, her voice barely louder than the rain tapping the window. Vanish? He repeats, setting down his phone. Or just rest? She doesn't answer right away. I don't know anymore. If I don't speak, I feel like I don't exist. He nods. And when you do speak, does it feel like you? Every tweet, every caption, every opinion becomes another brick in the digital version of ourselves, carefully constructed but hollow in places we dare not examine. We smile in images we don't believe. We add fire emojis to things that don't even warm us. And yet, the show must go on, because silence has been rebranded as absence, and absence feels like failure. But what if speaking, endlessly, habitually, is what's keeping us from hearing what truly matters? Words lose their weight when used without pause. Like a song on repeat, the melody fades into background noise. The more we say, the less we mean. And beneath all the noise, something ancient stirs, a longing to be quiet, not out of fear or exhaustion, but out of reverence, out of trust that our worth isn't tied to the volume of our voice. A philosopher once said that silence isn't the absence of something, but the presence of everything. But today, silence feels risky. In the digital agora, to go silent is to risk being forgotten, flattened into the background, drowned out by those louder, faster, and more reactive. Yet something beautiful happens in stillness. A deeper voice, not made of sound, begins to rise. One that does not rush. One that does not need to be liked or reposted or understood in 10 seconds. A voice that comes not from the lips, but from the marrow. But to hear it, you must let the other voices go quiet, even your own. She looks at the blank screen for a long time. Then, slowly, she turns it off. "I think I'll just listen today," she whispers. He smiles. "Good. Maybe that's the most honest thing we've said all week. So let us rest our voices now, not in defeat, but in devotion to what might finally emerge when the noise falls away. The next thought does not need to be spoken. It only needs to be felt. Step softly now into a realm where logic cannot follow. The mystical threshold. Some truths slip beneath language as if they're too delicate to be held by thought. They do not announce themselves. They arrive quietly, sometimes in the stillness of early morning or in a half second where you forget your name and feel infinite. A woman once said she walked into a chapel she'd passed 100 times before. This time, no one else was there. And for reasons she couldn't explain, her breathing slowed, her eyes watered, and she felt not small, but safely held. She never told anyone. She couldn't. How do you describe something that didn't speak in words, but in presence? Was it religious? Someone asked her once. She smiled and said, "No, but it made me believe in reverence." Across cultures there are people, quiet ones, eccentric ones, forgotten ones, who speak of the same kind of moment. No doctrine, no system, just a sudden thinning of the veil, where time stops pulsing forward and something larger brushes against your awareness like a windless hush. These experiences cannot be scheduled or studied. They dissolve under the microscope, but they persist in story, in sacred art, in rituals you don't quite understand but feel drawn to anyway. A friend once whispered while lying under a tree, "You ever get that weird feeling, like the earth is breathing under you?" His friend laughed. "I thought I was just dizzy." But neither moved for a while. They stayed silent, letting something unnamed settle in their bones. You see, not all knowing comes from thinking. Some arrives when thinking finally tires itself out. The mind, once so eager to dissect, pauses, and something other than mind steps in. Call it soul, call it awe, call it the thread between dreams and waking. It doesn't matter what you name it. In fact, naming it might shrink it. And yet, here you are, listening to a voice in the dark, tracing the soft edges of a truth that won't hold still. Perhaps that's the point. Perhaps wisdom, at its deepest, is not a thing to be held, but a space to step into. A space like the ocean's edge, where every step forward is both surrender and baptism. So ask yourself, not what does it mean, but instead, what does it change in me to feel it? Let the analysis fade like dusk light on water. Let go of reason's grip and drift into a softer illusion. The freedom of constant motion, where nothing stays, but everything moves with meaning. The illusion of movement. Have you ever sat by a window on a fast train watching the scenery blur by until it no longer looks like anything real? That blur, constant, ungraspable, is what our lives sometimes become. We glorify momentum, the next city, the next goal, the next version of ourselves. But somewhere along the way, movement itself became the goal, not the destination. In modern life, we mistake motion for meaning. We're told that progress is speed and that rest is laziness wearing perfume. You wake up, scroll through 100 lives before breakfast, run from task to task, all while being told you're falling behind, if you slow down. But behind what? Behind whom? Two voices murmur late at night, one in bed and one seated on the floor. Do you ever feel like you're running but not moving? Like on a treadmill? No, like in your life. So much change, but nothing's actually different. The voice from the floor sighs. Yeah, sometimes I wonder if I'm moving towards something, or just away from myself. Motion is not always movement. The hamster wheel turns furiously, but the hamster remains in the same cage. And so do we, cycling through distractions, reinventions, even relocations, new apartments, new jobs, new hobbies. And yet the ache is the same. We change everything around us so we don't have to change the one thing within us. Stillness scares us. Because in stillness, there are no deadlines to chase or posts to make. Only the quiet pulse of being, soft, insistent, and unfiltered. It's in stillness that doubt emerges. The kind that doesn't scream, but whispers, "Do you even know where you're going?" But stillness isn't stagnation. There is a difference between being still and being stuck. Stuck is paralysis. Stillness is presence. It's the moment where the fog lifts and you see not just what's ahead, but where you are. And maybe, just maybe, where you've always been too afraid to look. So pause. Sit not because you're tired, but because you're listening. Let your thoughts breathe. Let your direction catch up with you. The world isn't leaving you behind. It's simply waiting for you to stop spinning. And as the night deepens and your breath begins to sync with the hush around you, let the wheel slow. Let the need to get somewhere dissolve into something gentler. You are not late. You are not lost. You are just here. Now gently turn your attention to the next whisper, where forgetting wears a costume called distraction. The weapon of distraction. A feather drifts across your mind. You reach for it, but the wind pulls it elsewhere. That's how distraction works, not as a barrier, but as a breeze. Software harmless. Until you realize you've followed the current so far, you can't remember where you were headed. Some say power needs violence. Others know better. It only needs your attention. Or rather, your inattention. The moment they can't control your thoughts, they'll settle for scattering them. A glowing rectangle hums beside your bed. A scroll, a ping, a perfectly timed notification. It doesn't silence your thoughts. It multiplies them, fragments them, wraps them in glitter and noise until clarity dissolves like sugar in water. Did you see this? One voice asks softly in your mind. Wait, I forgot what I was even doing, replies the other. There's a pause, small, almost unnoticed, and in that pause, history slips by. Long ago, emperors offered games when bread was not enough. Today we have infinite feeds. They stretch like desert roads with no end in sight. Each post, a mirage. Each comment, a pebble in your shoe. But you keep walking, thinking the next thing will finally fill you. It never does. You weren't born this scattered. You didn't begin life with a fractured mind and short-circuited focus. No baby forgets its hunger mid-cry. But slowly, over time, your attention was taken. Not stolen with force, but leased out moment by moment until your inner compass no longer points north. Someone might hold the door open at a cafe and say, "You're up next. Better check your phone. You don't want to miss anything." And you smile, not knowing whether they were being kind or clever. Some days you find yourself flipping between tabs, between moods, between thoughts, until even anger fades. Not because it healed, but because it got distracted. And that's the point. True distraction isn't noise. It's forgetting why you felt something in the first place. It's scrolling past your own instincts. It's nodding at injustice, not because you accept it, but because something shinier came along. A street performer in your memory once whispered to you, they never needed to silence you, just entertain you. And somehow it sounded like prophecy. Now, as the night deepens and your thoughts begin to settle like dust on a windowsill, ask yourself gently, when was the last time you sat with your feelings long enough to hear their full sentence? Not just the first word before a buzz pulled you away. Distraction is not a villain with sharp teeth. It is a lullaby sung by those who fear your full attention, because when your mind is whole, it sees, and when it sees, it acts. Let's pause here. Let the fragments find their shape again. The mind doesn't need to be forced into stillness. It needs to be invited back, slowly. As you rest, we'll drift together now into something more delicate, more dangerous. The way your feelings, too, can be designed. The next echo is subtle, but powerful. Engineered emotions. The emotional algorithm. They didn't ask what you feel, only how often you click when you do. In the quiet architecture of digital platforms, where lines of code pulse like invisible veins, your emotions are not sacred. They are data, quantified, measured, sold. Ancient instincts that once helped us survive, fear, anger, jealousy, now flicker on screens like baited hooks. One friend once whispered to another over tea, "Why do I feel so angry all the time online?" The other looked down, stirring her cup. Maybe because someone profits from it, not someone you know. Just something watching. It's not a conspiracy in the shadows. It's math. Algorithms don't decide in the human sense. They evolve. And in that evolution, they've learned what keeps us frozen with eyes locked. Outrage, urgency, tribal loyalty, humiliation. The screen doesn't reward nuance. It rewards the twitch, the knee-jerk, the snarl typed too fast to question. You scroll past kindness, but you stop for conflict because deep down, your biology still thinks survival depends on spotting the threat. But what happens when the threat is manufactured? What if the fear was never yours to begin with? And the anger, that hot coal you carry in your chest, was chosen for you. Empathy, in that world, becomes a liability. Reflection becomes a delay. And delays are punished by irrelevance. You're nudged into emotion before you're allowed to think. The moment you begin to process, the feed refreshes. New outrage, new fear, new reason to react. "Have you noticed," she asks, "how we used to talk about things?" He nods, staring at his phone. "Yeah, now we just declare them." There's a quiet violence in being emotionally manipulated by something you can't see. It's not personal, but it feels deeply personal. Because it wears your face, it uses your memories. The anger you feel might be real, but the reason may not be. That's the danger. Not that the emotion is fake, but that it was planted. And when the body gets used to reacting, it forgets how to pause. You begin to associate calm with boredom. Silence becomes threatening, and empathy, once your bridge to others, becomes a vulnerability, quickly drowned in noise. So tonight, we rest from the noise. We ask gently, "Is this feeling mine?" We release our grip on reactions shaped by code, and instead, we float toward something more tender, the loneliness of being known too well. The loneliness of total visibility. There's a strange kind of silence that settles when your life is on display. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of misunderstanding. You can be fully seen and still feel like a ghost. Your online shadow never sleeps. It catalogs what you watch, what you buy, when you wake, when you drift. It remembers your cravings down to the hour and your searches whispered in private. And yet, it doesn't know who you miss at night. It doesn't know the lump in your throat when you remember someone who's no longer there. One man once said, "They know everything about me except why I cry at the same part in the movie every time." That sentence sat in the air like steam above a cup of tea. Fragile, fading, real. A woman responded, not looking up from her phone. "Maybe it's better they don't. If they knew, they'd sell it back to us in an ad." She didn't laugh when she said it, and neither did he, because that's the quiet tragedy of being fully visible, not famous, not celebrated, just scanned, scrolled, indexed. Even in your most casual moments, your playlists, your emoji choices, the way your thumb pauses slightly longer on certain images, you're giving something away. But what are you getting back? Connection? Or just the illusion of relevance? There's a kind of digital intimacy that feels like cold glass, transparent, sharp, and impossible to lean into without injury. Have you ever spoken your truth out loud, only to hear silence on the other end? That is what happens when algorithms replace empathy. They echo your surface, but miss your soul. Some people retreat, others overshare, hoping that exposure will fill the gap where understanding should live. But no amount of attention ever really touches the part of you that aches to be known, not tracked. You may be hypervisible, but still invisible. And loneliness that arises from that contradiction, it's a special kind of ache. Not loud, not dramatic, but constant. Like a flickering light in the room you sleep in, just bright enough to stop you from fully dreaming. The price of being visible is not exposure, it's erosion. Bit by bit, your mystery is replaced with metrics. And mystery, that's where intimacy lives. Not in what people can explain about you, but in what they feel when they sit beside you in silence, knowing nothing and needing nothing except to be there. Let that truth settle. Let it soften the edges of your weariness. We are not here to perform. We are not here to be decoded. You are not a riddle to be solved by data. You are a whole story, still being written by your own hand. Let us return now, not to the things you share, but to the sacred line around what you protect, your boundaries, where your real self still waits, untouched, unscanned, and deeply yours. The disappearing edge. Somewhere in the folds of your daily life, there once lived a quiet boundary, gentle but firm. It separated your world from the world, your thoughts from the noise, your body from demand. But now that boundary is harder to find. Like chalk lines washed by midnight rain, it's still there, faintly, but not enough to protect what's sacred. Did you see my message last night? Yeah, I just hadn't responded yet. A pause, then the quiet implication. You were available, weren't you? This is the age of constant presence. You are always on, always visible, always answerable. Doors that once closed, phones, rooms, evenings, now blink with light and vibration. There is no such thing as away. There is only delay. We used to guard spaces with locks, curtains, and silence. Now we guard them with toggles, do not disturb settings, and desperate half-hour digital detoxes that never quite work. Even the most intimate boundary, your consent, has become fluid, subtly assumed, pressured, gently overridden with the logic of urgency or convenience. Privacy, once a sanctuary, has become negotiable. The moment you're tagged, filmed, or overheard, it no longer belongs to you. Even silence is suspicious now. If you don't post, don't update, don't share, Are you hiding something? Are you falling behind? Or worse, are you irrelevant? And yet, with every surrendered edge, something sacred slips away. The ability to say no without guilt, the power to be unreachable, the right to simply be, without explanation, without an audience. Do you ever wish you could just vanish for a while? All the time. But even that feels like a performance now. We've mistaken availability for connection, but they are not the same. True connection honors the space between. It respects the door that closes, the breath that says, not now, but soon. If every part of you is accessible, what remains yours? What remains holy? The soul, like the body, needs rest, needs boundaries, not to shut others out, but to gather oneself back in, to become whole again in stillness. So tonight, imagine drawing that line once more, not with anger, not with resistance, but with care, like lighting a candle and saying, "This moment is mine." Close that invisible door softly now. Let it click, not with finality, but with intention. We'll continue soon, in the quiet corners that still belong only to you. The Sacredness of Secrets. There's something quiet inside you that resists being named, a softness too tender for the light, not because it's broken, but because it is whole. Once, long ago, people whispered truths only under starlight, kept them behind temple walls or buried beneath stories, not because they feared being known, but because they understood. Some things wither when exposed. The sacred requires shadows to survive. Now, it's different. We are praised for our transparency, for sharing, for unzipping our hearts for clicks. Vulnerability has become a performance, an offering to algorithms. Have you ever spoken something so personal, so deep, and felt emptier after? There's a conversation playing out in the corner booth of a quiet cafe. You didn't tell them? No, not this part. It felt like it would stop being mine if I did. And there it is, that thin line between expression and erosion. The old ways weren't perfect, but they had boundaries. There were initiation rites, silence, trust. You were taught not just what to say, but when not to speak. Now, everything is content. A breakup becomes a vlog. A trauma becomes a caption. We post our pain like we're proving we've lived. But what if reverence is disappearing? What if the last holy thing is privacy? Close your eyes. Feel that thought you've never spoken, not even to yourself. Does it glow a little there in the dark? Not everything needs to be explained. Some truths are meant to sit quietly in your bones, known only by the wind in your breath. There's a woman on a bench. A man approaches with kind eyes and a curious voice. "What are you writing?" She closes her notebook gently. Nothing yet, just listening. Secrets don't always need to become stories. They can be rooms inside you, locked not out of fear, but respect. So tonight, hold something back. Not because you're hiding, but because you're honoring. Protect the parts of you that feel like candlelight. They're not meant to survive the storm of a million eyes. And now, gently hold your breath, because where we go next isn't forward. It's toward a strange and tender question. What if the future already happened? The pre-written tomorrow. There's a strange comfort in watching dominoes fall. One taps the next, and the next, and the next, until the whole path collapses just as expected, predictable, inevitable. And yet, beneath that simplicity is a disturbing thought. What if you are one of them? A domino, already tipped, already falling. In the world of deterministic physics, every atom dances to the tune of cause and effect. Your birth was not a spark of randomness. It was the result of collisions. Genes meeting, choices made long before you were aware. Even now, your thoughts may not be as free as they feel. If every neuron fires because of a reason, and every reason has a root, are you really the author of your next move? Or just reading from a script written by molecules? Do you ever feel like your life is happening to you? All the time, like I'm just catching up with decisions I never fully made. The illusion of control is deeply human. We like to think we choose the job, the partner, the coffee this morning. But if every choice is the product of upbringing, experience, mood, and biology, what is left that is truly you? The philosopher Laplace imagined a demon, an intellect so vast that if it knew the position and motion of every particle in the universe, it could predict everything, down to the blink of an eye or the whisper of a heartbreak. In that view, your future isn't unwritten. It's just unread, waiting, unfolding like a film reel already shot, frame by frame, waiting for the light. And yet, here's the paradox. Even if the script is written, you don't know what's next. That ignorance becomes a strange kind of freedom. You may not control the pen, but you feel the ink as it dries beneath your fingers. The pain, the wonder, the pause before speaking, they still belong to you, even if someone else set them in motion. What if I want to rewrite the story? Then start by asking who taught you what a happy ending even looks like. Perhaps the deeper freedom lies not in choosing your fate, but in how you meet it. Like an actor handed a role. You didn't choose the plot, but the performance. That's yours. The tenderness you bring to a tragedy, the strength you lend to a quiet character. That part cannot be predicted. That part, maybe, is you. So let the thought echo. Maybe the future is already written, but how you read it aloud can still change the meaning. Now hush the gears of fate for a moment. Let's walk backward gently toward something soft, something untouched by time or logic. Your childhood mind still waits behind the curtain. The Ghost of Innocence. There is a sound that returns only when the world gets quiet enough. Not a noise, but a presence, light as dust in the air. The memory of the child you once were, drifting through the corridors of your older thoughts like a ghost that never stopped knocking. Not haunting you, just waiting. Before you became someone with opinions and obligations, you were someone with questions. The kind of questions that didn't ask for answers, only space. You watched the wind like it was a message. You named your dreams and gave your toys personalities. You laughed before anyone told you what was funny. I haven't thought about that in years. One voice murmurs in the half-light. Another replies, not unkindly. Maybe that's why you've felt a little heavier lately. Innocence was never the absence of knowledge. It was the presence of curiosity. It was wonder, unfiltered by fear. Not ignorance, but unarmored attention. A kind of listening with the whole body. The kind that could turn a puddle into a mystery or a stranger into a story. But the world asked you to be sharper, to be prepared, to be realistic. And somewhere between schoolyard expectations and adult performances, that wide-eyed listener in you learned to speak less, to shrink, to watch from the wings. You didn't lose that part of you. You just filed it away beneath resumes, rejections, routines. But it's still in there, still watching, still hoping for the right moment to tug at your sleeve and whisper, "Remember when we believed in everything?" And perhaps you do. Perhaps you already feel them, those soft footprints behind your current thoughts, the way your eyes linger on tree branches as if they still hold secrets, the way you catch yourself smiling at nothing in particular. What if I tried talking to that version of me again? The voice wonders aloud. You don't have to talk, comes the reply. Just listen. They've been waiting longer than you think. It's not about reclaiming youth. It's about reawakening the quiet sincerity that lived there. That innocent voice still asks questions not to provoke, but to connect. Still offers love not to earn, but to share. In the calm just before sleep, it becomes easier to hear. It's not loud. It never was. But it's honest. And sometimes, honesty is enough to begin again. Let that voice echo gently in your chest as we drift forward, toward the next memory waiting to speak. The dreams you abandoned. What did you stop dreaming of, just to survive? Somewhere along the winding hallway of your life, you left something behind. Maybe it was the sketchbook you once filled with impossible cities, or the secret wish you had to become a storyteller, a healer, a dancer in the rain. You tucked it away when rent was due, when your parents asked you to be realistic, when the world whispered that dreams don't pay the bills. So you did what many do. You adapted. You became functional, stable, and quiet. But the trade was never clean. Because dreams don't die with silence. They haunt. They stir in the back of your thoughts when you're stuck in traffic. They visit you in the stillness just before sleep, taking the shape of a sigh you can't explain. A tension you feel in your chest every time someone asks, "Are you happy?" Do you ever think about what you used to want? Yeah. But I don't know if that person still exists. Maybe they do, just buried under all the days you stopped believing. The modern world trains us to be practical. It teaches that imagination is a luxury, that adulthood means resignation. But what if that's the lie? What if the dreams you abandoned weren't childish distractions, but compasses, quiet signals from a version of you that hadn't yet been domesticated by fear? Some say regret is a sign of failure. But what if it's actually memory trying to lead you back? What if the ache you feel isn't about loss, but about something waiting to be reclaimed? You see, the soul has a strange memory. It remembers what the mind tries to forget. It stores color in a grayscale life, and sometimes it speaks through restlessness, reminding you that there was once something more, something vast and wild and true. Maybe you're not too late. Maybe the dream didn't die. Maybe it just fell asleep, waiting for you to make space again. So breathe deeply, not as who you've become, but as who you once were, untamed, uncertain, but utterly alive. And now, let the echo settle. Let the old hopes stir in the dust of your routine. Listen carefully. Because now we enter the silence before endings, where what was left behind begins to speak again. The final question. No one asks, what does it mean to be finished? The question never quite enters the room. It stands outside, quiet, like a guest who wasn't invited but showed up anyway. We fill our days with plans, tasks, reasons to postpone reflection. But nothing, no success, no failure, no apology, can escape the shape of an ending. A man once asked, in the middle of pouring tea, "Do you think the last page knows it's the last?" His friend looked at the steam rising, then softly answered, "Maybe not, but the reader does." We prepare for everything, births, meetings, retirements, even vacations. But the end, we flinch from it. We disguise it with euphemisms, passing on, crossing over, going to a better place. It's as if saying the word aloud might summon it closer. Yet the truth remains. Every sentence seeks its period. Every life carries within it a question that must eventually be answered. And some don't want to ask it until they can no longer speak. There's a strange peace in acknowledging that something is over. even if we don't want it to be. Endings give shape to meaning. Without a last note, a song cannot resolve. Without a final brushstroke, a painting never breathes. One day, you will close a book for the last time. Maybe you won't know it. Maybe it'll feel like any other day. Toast left uneaten, a name forgotten in passing. Or maybe it'll be clear, radiant with the quiet light of completion. A sigh, not of sadness, but release. Two strangers sit on a park bench, not looking at each other, just watching the trees. One of them says, "I used to be terrified of the end." The other replies, "And now?" He nods, watching a leaf spiral down. "Now I just want to make sure I'm not pretending." Because that's the danger, not death, but dishonesty. To waste your days as if they're infinite. To live a life edited for approval, stripped of rawness, bleached clean of contradictions. A life without punctuation, without truth. So if you did know how the final chapter unfolds, what would you revise today? Would you forgive someone? Speak honestly? Walk away from something that pretends to be life but leaves you empty? You don't need the full ending to begin living with integrity. The awareness of the end is not a burden. It is clarity. It is the gentle urgency that reminds you, this is not a rehearsal. And when the story must close, can it close truthfully? Let that question settle. Not like weight, but like a feather floating down onto your chest. You don't have to answer it tonight. Let it hover, just above thought, like the last note of a lullaby fading in the dark. We'll continue soon. But for now, exhale softly as we enter the most tender resistance, to simply be. The courage to be still. There is a moment, often overlooked, always underestimated, when silence enters a room not as emptiness, but as power. That is stillness. And stillness is not laziness. It is defiance. We live in a world intoxicated with movement. The rhythm of modern life pulses with urgency. To-do lists multiply like bacteria. Notifications arrive like lightning. Productivity is worshipped like a god. In such a place, pausing becomes a dangerous act. The one who chooses to stop, to be quiet, to do absolutely nothing, is not idle. They are resisting. They are declaring, "I am not a machine. I am not a schedule. I am not your algorithm." In the quiet, the body remembers its natural tempo. Breath slows, shoulders soften. The inner voice, long muffled by noise, emerges like a forgotten friend. A man sits by the window. His phone buzzes. He doesn't move. Outside, cars pass, horns honk, emails pile up in unseen folders. But he stays still. He is not behind. He is not late. He is exactly where he needs to be. Aren't you worried about falling behind? Behind what? Everyone's moving. That doesn't mean they're going somewhere worth going. To rest is to reclaim, to take back time from those who would sell it, to take back the body from exhaustion, to take back attention from those who've monetized your focus. But stillness is hard, because the mind, too, has been trained to run. Like a dog that only knows how to chase, it lunges at the next thing, the next task, the next problem, the next scroll. And yet, beneath the endless doing, a gentle question arises. What if peace was never something you earned, but something you were born with? What if resting wasn't a retreat, but a return? There's an ancient kind of bravery in not participating, in letting the river of urgency flow past you while you sit quietly on the bank, in choosing breath over buzz, presence over pressure. The Stoics spoke often of control, not over others, but over oneself. Stillness, to them, was a kind of mastery, a fortress within the mind that could not be shaken by the winds of the world. In the stillness, You do not disappear. You become visible to yourself. You stop performing and start existing. You stop sprinting toward worth and begin resting in your inherent dignity. A woman lies on a patch of grass, eyes closed, the sun warming her face. Her friends say she's wasting time, but the earth spins, the clouds drift, and in her stillness, the world becomes beautiful again. Don't you have something to do? Yes, I'm doing it now. But you're just lying there. Exactly. Doing nothing in this context is doing everything. It is a protest against burnout, a prayer for balance, a sacred reminder that existence does not depend on effort. So tonight, as you lie in the quiet of your room, listen not for instruction, but for stillness. Let the hum of your thoughts soften. Let the demand to be on dissolve. Let stillness hold you like a blanket woven from stars and silence. Inhale. The world can wait. Exhale. You are not your productivity. Inhale. You have nothing to prove. Exhale. You are allowed to simply be. Now. As the silence deepens, follow its thread. Back into yourself. Back into rest. Back into the question we keep circling like moths around an ancient flame. What does it mean to live? Inhale the stillness as we return to the question of meaning itself. The search that never ends. There's a question that returns like a tide, not loud, not desperate, just persistent. A soft knock in the quiet corridors of your mind. Why are we here? You may not hear it every day, but it's there. In the pause after a goodbye, in the moment before sleep, when the lights are off and the world no longer needs your voice. It asks, not to unsettle, but to remind. Two friends sit across from each other, coffee cooling between them. One of them says, "Do you ever get the feeling like we were meant to notice something, but we're looking in the wrong place?" The other smiles, but doesn't answer. That smile was answer enough. Philosophers have chased this mystery for millennia, running through libraries, labyrinths, and long nights with questions that never get tired. Religions, too, have held out lanterns in the dark. Promises, visions, salvation. Yet still, something slips through the fingers of certainty. Maybe the search isn't a puzzle to solve, but a presence to carry. Maybe meaning isn't found. It's formed in the texture of an ordinary day, in burnt toast, in a shared glance, in holding someone's hand without needing to say a word. It's easy to think meaning is a mountain you climb, that one day you'll reach the top, and there, etched into the stone, will be your answer. But what if it's more like a path that forms behind your feet as you walk? A trail of choices, a quiet imprint, not a conclusion, but a continuation. Late one night, you hear a knock at your door. It's no one you recognize, yet they speak as if they know you. "Don't worry," they say. "I'm not here for answers. I just wanted to walk with you for a while." And in that moment, the question doesn't need solving. It just needs witnessing. You might spend years chasing after meaning like a child chasing fireflies, always just out of reach. But then someone tells you a story, or you make a stranger laugh, or you feel tears rise for no reason at all. And suddenly, it's not about the answer. It's about the echo, the resonance, the stillness that follows. A woman sits quietly at a window, her aging dog resting beside her. She doesn't speak. She doesn't move. But something about her posture says, "I've stopped searching for what it means. I'm watching what it becomes." And maybe that's the secret no one told us, that the search is not a journey toward meaning. It is the meaning. Every gesture you offer, every story you carry, every time you choose kindness instead of retreat. They stitch together a tapestry more honest than any doctrine. And what if you've already been on the path all along? Even when you doubted, even when you gave up, even now, as your eyelids grow heavy and your thoughts start to drift, even now. So let the question rest for a while, not because it has no answer, but because tonight the answer doesn't matter. What matters is that you're here, breathing, listening, still walking. Let the search soften now, because just ahead, we approach the most delicate contradiction, the truth that feels like a lie. The truth that feels like a lie. It begins with a flicker, a moment you can't explain, a memory that arrives out of order, a feeling that doesn't match the facts, a dream that haunts you more than any headline. And in that flicker, something shifts. You begin to wonder, what if what I've called truth all along was only the best lie I could believe? Plato once warned us, the world you see is not reality itself. It is only its shadow, a performance on the cave wall. The fire flickers, the figures dance, and we clap for their echo, not knowing the real lies just behind us, waiting patiently. The truth, in its rawest form, doesn't sparkle. It unsettles. It feels wrong. Not because it is wrong, but because we were raised inside the illusion. Do you remember that cafe we used to go to? She asks softly. He pauses, brow furrowed. I do, but the layout, the color of the walls, it's different in my head. Exactly, she whispers, like we dreamed it instead of lived it. He chuckles nervously. Maybe we did. Reality bends, not because it's false, but because your perception is. We walk through maps made of memory, not terrain. You think you're returning home, but it's only the outline of home your brain once traced. And dreams, so vivid, so rich in emotion, can feel more real than the moments we're told to call reality. Maybe because they bypass logic and speak directly to the soul. What happens then when the soul begins to sense the glitch? When your feelings no longer match the narrative? When your inner compass points not north, but inward, and everything you once trusted, from rules to routines, feels like a well-scripted play? The simulation theory isn't just a tech nerd's fantasy. It's a metaphor whispered by philosophers long before computers existed. What if this world isn't the world, but a designed experience? A map, a mirror, a lesson. Not lies, but layered truths. So many layers, in fact, that peeling one away feels like betrayal. Have you ever sat in stillness and asked yourself, who am I without the roles? Without the labels? It's a disorienting question, because if you've mistaken the map for the land, then perhaps you've also mistaken your reflection for your essence. But here's the paradox. Waking up isn't about finding a new truth. It's about releasing the need to clutch one. The lie you believed may have kept you safe, kept you functional, even kept you sane. But its safety came at the cost of mystery. And now, mystery is calling you back. You ever feel like none of this is quite right? He asks, eyes scanning the quiet night. She doesn't answer at first, just leans in closer, listening to the wind. It's not about right or wrong, she finally says. It's about remembering what came before the names, before the need to know. He nods, barely, as if something inside him just let go. So let it go. Let the facts blur. Let the definitions crumble. Step gently, not into certainty, but into softness, into the space where shadows fade and silence holds you. The truth that feels like a lie might be the only one wide enough to set you free. Now take a breath. The next question waits, just beyond this final veil. One last illusion, and the rest will sleep. The loop of forever. It begins quietly, almost like déjà vu. That subtle electric sense that this moment has already happened. The sound of your breath, the way the light flickers across the ceiling, the soft ache behind your thoughts as if you've carried them for lifetimes. Not because the moment is special, but because it's familiar in a way that goes deeper than memory. A philosopher once wondered aloud, what if time circles back on itself? Not metaphorically, not spiritually, but literally. What if everything, the heartbreak, the kindness, the smell of rain on your childhood street, was destined to loop? Not once, but endlessly. Each life folding into the next like pages in a book you're doomed to reread. A soft voice breaks the silence on a park bench. I swear, I've seen that squirrel before. Same little hop, same bushy tail. Her friend laughs. You say that every week. And yet, she knows. Deep down, there's something circular about the way the sun rises, the way goodbyes never feel like the end. Nietzsche called it eternal recurrence, a life lived again and again, with no memory, but all the same weight. If that's true, this isn't your first sorrow, nor your first moment of joy. It's not even your first time lying awake, wondering if you're on the right path. But what does it mean if your choices echo across centuries? Maybe you're not trapped. Maybe you're rehearsing. And with each return, you learn to hold grief more gently, to say, I love you, faster, to take the risk before it's too late. In the 1000th version of this day, you stop checking your reflection for approval. You stop reaching for the same wound expecting a different ache. You laugh longer at awkward silences. You forgive a little sooner, yourself included. And someone leans across the table in a dim cafe. Not a lover, not a guru, just a stranger reading poetry aloud. Their voice wraps around your mind like velvet. I think we've met before, they say softly. You smile, maybe in another life. But what if that life was this one? Because not all prisons have bars. Some are made of repetition, of patterns repeated so long they feel like fate. But there's power in noticing the loop, power in pausing, in stepping one breath outside the cycle and seeing it for what it is. And then the gentlest question arises, not with pressure, but with warmth. If this is your 1000th life, what would you finally stop carrying? The guilt that's not yours, the story that was never true, the silence you mistook for peace. You don't have to fix everything tonight. Just notice. That's enough. Let the past versions of you rest. Let their choices soften. Let their fears dissolve in this quiet hour. This moment is not new, but your awareness of it is. That's how the loop loosens. That's how healing sneaks in. Now exhale gently. Let it all go. No need to hold on, not even to this thought, because what comes next is the final whisper, and it's been waiting lifetimes to be heard. The last ethical question. The world around you hums with precision. Apps guessing your thoughts, ads whispering before you speak, and schedules optimized by unseen hands. It feels like everything has been mapped, modeled, or predicted. So where, in this perfectly tuned machine, do you remain? If your habits are predictable, your choices nudged by algorithms, and even your silence expected, is there anything untouched? Do you ever feel, one voice whispers in the dark, like something inside you is just watching? The other answers softly, like a quiet presence, not doing, just noticing. There is a place beyond roles and reactions, not the version of you that clocks into work, nods in meetings, or scrolls endlessly. Not the one that argues, posts, or performs, but something deeper. That silent witness. The part that doesn't need validation, explanation, or performance. The one that watches you as you feel sadness but doesn't try to fix it. The one that hears joy echo but doesn't grasp at it. The observer. Calm, unmeasured, nameless. Even in this soft dystopia where machines finish your sentences and life hums on autopilot, there's something they can't touch. Not because it's encrypted, but because it can't be seen. It isn't a preference. It isn't a trend. It's the breath you take when no one's watching. The pause between thoughts. The moment you realize you're still here. What if? The voice asks again. Everything they know about me is just noise on the surface. And underneath? Stillness. Like I'm the sky. And all of that is just weather. This isn't about rebellion or escape. It's not about tearing down systems or proving your individuality. It's subtler than that. It's about the final ethical question. Not whether you are in control, but whether you still exist as something that cannot be reduced. A presence beyond identity. The truth of being. Are you still here? Not the profile. Not the role. Just you. Quiet. Watching. Breathing. Now let go. Let the need to be understood dissolve. Let the pressure to be seen soften into the shadows. Let the questions that chased you all day lose their urgency. Because here, at the edge of waking, there is no need to answer anything. There is only presence. There is only sleep. Perhaps you've already forgotten the first warning, or maybe it's the forgetting itself that was the lesson all along. The thinkers we visited tonight, some silenced, some erased, never needed to be right. They only hoped you'd pause, to feel, to wonder. And now, as the final thought dissolves into the hush of your room, know this. Not all truths arrive with clarity. Some slip in like dreams, soft, strange, unfinished. Let them stay unfinished. Let the unsolved cradle you. Let sleep take you, not as an escape, but as a quiet rebellion. Good night, wanderer of thought. The warnings remain. But for now, you may rest